Welcome, and thank you for joining me on another quiet journey into the shadows of the ancient world. When most people think about Greek mythology, they imagine the mighty Zeus hurling thunderbolts from Mount Olympus, Poseidon ruling the seas, or Hades governing the silent world beneath the earth. Yet, behind these famous stories lies a far stranger and more mysterious universe, one filled with questions that have never been fully answered. The myths of ancient Greece were not simply stories told for entertainment. To many of the people who lived in that world, these tales carried fragments of memory, echoes of events so old that their true origins had long been forgotten. Over generations, history may have blended with imagination, transforming real places, real fears, and real mysteries into the legends we know today. One of the most fascinating mysteries begins before the reign of Zeus himself, in a time that the myths describe as unimaginably ancient. According to the stories, before the Olympian gods ruled the cosmos, there existed another generation of powerful beings known as the Titans. They were immense, ancient entities whose origins stretched back to the very beginning of creation. Yet, when modern readers encounter these stories, a strange question emerges. Why do the Titans feel so different from the gods who came after them? Zeus, Hera, Athena, and Apollo often behave like powerful humans, complete with emotions, ambitions, and flaws. The Titans, however, seem more distant, more elemental, almost like forces of nature given names and personalities. Some scholars have wondered whether the Titans might represent memories of an older belief system that existed before the rise of the Greek civilization we recognize today. It is possible that the myths preserve traces of forgotten religions whose original meanings vanished long ago. In this interpretation, the famous war between the Olympians and the Titans may symbolize a transition between cultures, a distant memory of one civilization replacing another so long ago that only myth remained. The story of the Titanomachy, the great war between gods and titans, is itself filled with mysteries. Ancient sources describe a conflict so vast that mountains shook, oceans boiled, and the sky trembled. For 10 years, the struggle continued, ending only when Zeus and his allies emerged victorious. Yet the details are surprisingly vague. Unlike many other myths, which provide elaborate descriptions of heroes and adventures, the Titanomachy often feels fragmented, as though parts of the story have been lost. Some researchers believe this may indicate that the myth originated from traditions much older than the surviving texts. What we possess today could be only a small piece of a much larger narrative that disappeared thousands of years ago. Then there is Mount Olympus itself. Today, Olympus is a real mountain in northern Greece, rising dramatically above the surrounding landscape. But the Olympus of mythology seems to exist in a different reality altogether. The ancient poets described it as a place untouched by storms, where the air remained eternally clear and golden light illuminated the halls of the gods. Curiously, no mortal traveler in the myths ever seems capable of simply climbing to the summit and entering the divine palace. Olympus appears less like a physical location and more like a threshold between worlds, a place existing both on earth and beyond it. This idea appears repeatedly throughout Greek mythology. Certain locations seem to occupy a strange position between reality and the supernatural. Forests become gateways to hidden realms. Islands vanish into mist. Caves lead to places that should not exist. Again and again, myths describe landscapes where ordinary rules cease to apply. To the ancient Greeks, the world may have felt filled with invisible boundaries separating the familiar from the unknown. Among the most mysterious places of all was Delphi, home of the famous oracle. People traveled from across the Mediterranean to seek guidance from the priestess, known as the Pythia. Kings, generals, merchants, and ordinary citizens all came hoping to glimpse their future. The process itself was deeply mysterious. The Pythia would enter a sacred chamber beneath the temple and deliver cryptic messages believed to come directly from Apollo. These prophecies often proved astonishingly influential, shaping major political and military decisions. Yet one mystery remains. What exactly happened inside that chamber? Ancient descriptions are surprisingly inconsistent. Some accounts suggest that vapors rose from cracks in the earth, placing the priestess into a trance-like state. Others describe a more spiritual experience involving divine possession. For centuries, historians debated whether these vapors were real or merely symbolic. Then, in modern times, geological studies revealed evidence of fault lines beneath the site, leading some researchers to speculate that natural gases may indeed have played a role. Even so, no definitive answer exists. The Oracle of Delphi remains suspended between science and mystery, much like the myths themselves. The Greeks believed that Delphi marked the center of the world. According to legend, Zeus released two eagles from opposite ends of the earth, and they met above Delphi, revealing its sacred significance. This story may sound simple, but it hints at a deeper pattern found throughout mythology. Again and again, ancient cultures identified special places they considered the center of existence. Why did so many civilizations share this idea? Was it purely symbolic, or did people genuinely believe that certain locations possessed unusual power? As night settles over the ancient world of myth, another mystery begins to emerge from the darkness. It concerns not the gods above, but the realm below, the kingdom of Hades. Unlike many modern depictions, the Greek underworld was not simply a place of punishment. It was a vast and complex landscape inhabited by nearly every soul after death. Rivers flowed through its shadows. Forgotten spirits wandered its fields. Strange beings guarded its boundaries. Yet descriptions of this realm often contain details that feel remarkably vivid, as though the storytellers were describing a place they somehow knew intimately. The river Styx, for example, appears throughout countless myths. Gods swore their most sacred oaths upon its waters. To break such an oath invited catastrophic consequences. Why was this particular river so important? Some scholars suggest that sacred rivers held deep symbolic meaning in many ancient cultures, representing boundaries between worlds. Others wonder whether memories of real rivers inspired the legends. Whatever the truth may be, the Styx became one of the most enduring symbols of mystery in the ancient imagination. Even stranger are the figures who inhabited the underworld. Charon, the silent ferryman; Cerberus, the three-headed guardian; the judges of the dead. These beings appear again and again across different stories, often with remarkable consistency. Such consistency has led some researchers to speculate that these myths may preserve elements of very old religious beliefs concerning death and the afterlife, beliefs that predate classical Greece itself. As we continue our journey deeper into the mysteries of Greek mythology, we begin to realize that many of these stories are not merely tales about gods and monsters. They are windows into the fears, hopes, and unanswered questions of an ancient civilization. Behind every legend stands another mystery. And behind every mystery lies another question waiting in the darkness, just beyond the reach of certainty. As the centuries passed and the stories of the gods spread across the shores of the Mediterranean, certain mysteries began to stand apart from all others. These were not simply tales of heroes battling monsters or gods interfering in human affairs. They were deeper enigmas, stories wrapped in layers of uncertainty, legends that seemed to hint at forgotten worlds and lost knowledge. Among all of them, perhaps none has captured the imagination more completely than the mystery of Atlantis. Unlike many famous myths that originated in the distant oral traditions of Greece, the story of Atlantis appears in the writings of the philosopher Plato. According to his account, Atlantis was an island kingdom of extraordinary wealth and power, located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, known today as the Strait of Gibraltar. The Atlanteans possessed magnificent cities, advanced engineering, enormous temples, and a civilization that seemed almost impossible by the standards of the ancient world. Their capital was said to consist of concentric rings of land and water, carefully designed and connected by canals. Vast fleets sailed from its harbors, and its influence stretched across distant lands. Yet the story does not end with greatness. According to Plato, the Atlanteans eventually became arrogant. Their society drifted away from virtue and wisdom. As their greed grew, divine punishment followed. In a single terrible day and night, earthquakes shook the earth, floods swept across the land, and Atlantis vanished beneath the sea forever. For more than 2,000 years, people have wondered whether Atlantis was real. Some believe Plato invented the story as a philosophical lesson. Others argue that the tale may preserve distant memories of a real civilization destroyed by natural disaster. The mystery deepened when archaeologists uncovered evidence of the ancient Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. The Minoans were highly advanced for their time, possessing grand palaces, extensive trade networks, and sophisticated engineering. Around the second millennium BCE, a catastrophic volcanic eruption occurred on the nearby island of Thera, known today as Santorini. The explosion was one of the largest in recorded history and may have devastated much of the surrounding region. Could memories of such a disaster have survived for centuries before becoming the legend of Atlantis? No one knows. Others point toward entirely different locations. Some search the Atlantic Ocean itself. Others suggest the North Sea, the Mediterranean, or even distant lands beyond Europe. Every few years, a new theory emerges. Yet Atlantis remains hidden behind a veil of uncertainty. Its mystery endures precisely because it can never be fully proven or fully disproven. If Atlantis represents a lost civilization beneath the sea, then Hyperborea represents something even stranger, a civilization beyond the edge of the known world. The ancient Greeks spoke of Hyperborea as a paradise located far to the north, beyond the reach of winter storms and ordinary human travel. According to legend, the sun shone there for months without setting. The people lived extraordinarily long lives. Disease was unknown. Conflict was rare. Happiness seemed woven into the fabric of existence itself. The mysterious land was closely associated with Apollo, one of the most important gods in the Greek pantheon. Some myths claimed that Apollo spent part of every year among the Hyperboreans before returning south. Sacred gifts were said to arrive from Hyperborea through long chains of messengers stretching across distant lands. Yet despite these connections, no Greek traveler ever provided a clear description of the place. This uncertainty created one of mythology's most enduring puzzles. Was Hyperborea merely an imaginary paradise, or did it reflect ancient knowledge of distant northern regions unknown to most Greeks? Some historians have suggested that stories of unusual phenomena near the Arctic Circle, including long periods of daylight during summer, may have inspired the myths. Others believe Hyperborea symbolized an idealized world, a place representing perfection rather than geography. Yet certain details remain difficult to explain. Ancient writers occasionally described Hyperborea with surprising confidence, as though it were more than a simple fantasy. Maps from later periods sometimes attempted to locate it. Explorers searched for it, mystics speculated about it. Over time, Hyperborea transformed into one of history's great lost worlds, a kingdom forever hidden beyond the horizon. Not all mysteries concerned lost civilizations. Some centered upon forgotten gods, whose names have nearly vanished from memory. Modern audiences usually remember Zeus, Athena, Poseidon, and a handful of others. Yet the religious landscape of ancient Greece was far more complicated. Scattered across old inscriptions and fragments of texts are references to strange deities whose stories have largely disappeared. One example is the enigmatic goddess Nyx, the personification of night itself. Unlike many gods who occupied specific roles within nature, Nyx embodied darkness in its most primordial form. Ancient myths describe her as so powerful that even Zeus treated her with caution. This is a remarkable claim, considering Zeus ruled the cosmos. Yet despite her immense significance, relatively few stories survive about her. She lingers in mythology like a shadow at the edge of vision, suggesting a forgotten depth beneath the more familiar narratives. Then there was Erebus, embodiment of deep darkness; Moros, associated with doom; Oases, connected to misery; Keres, representing old age. These figures existed within the mythology, yet rarely appeared in popular stories. Their presence hints at layers of belief that may once have been far more important than surviving sources suggest. Some researchers believe these forgotten deities may represent remnants of older religious traditions, gradually absorbed into the Olympian system. As cultures evolved and merged, certain gods rose to prominence while others faded into obscurity. What remains today may be only a fraction of a much larger spiritual landscape. Equally mysterious were the countless prophecies that shaped Greek mythology. Again and again, characters attempted to avoid their foretold destinies, only to bring them about through their own actions. The most famous example concerns Oedipus. Before his birth, a prophecy declared that he would kill his father and marry his mother. Horrified, his parents tried to prevent the prediction from coming true. Their efforts failed. Every attempt to escape destiny ultimately pushed events toward the very future they feared. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout Greek myth. Why were prophecies so often impossible to avoid? One interpretation suggests that the Greeks viewed fate as an unbreakable force governing the universe itself. Even the gods could not entirely escape its power. Another possibility is more psychological. Perhaps these stories reflect a profound observation about human behavior. People often create the outcomes they fear through the choices they make to avoid them. Yet some prophecies remain genuinely unsettling. The Oracle of Delphi occasionally delivered predictions so cryptic that their meanings became clear only after events had already unfolded. Ancient historians recorded instances where rulers misunderstood warnings, leading to disastrous consequences. Whether these stories were exaggerated over time or reflected genuine experiences remains impossible to determine. Beyond public temples and official worship existed another layer of religion shrouded in secrecy. Throughout Greece, secret cults conducted ceremonies hidden from outsiders. Among the most famous were the Eleusinian mysteries, initiation rites dedicated to Demeter and Persephone. Participants swore never to reveal what occurred during these ceremonies. The oath was taken so seriously that almost nothing certain is known about the rituals even today. This silence has fascinated historians for centuries. Thousands of initiates participated over nearly 2,000 years, including philosophers, politicians, and emperors. Yet the central secrets remained remarkably well protected. Ancient sources suggest that participants experienced something profoundly transformative, something that altered their understanding of life and death. What exactly happened within those sacred halls remains one of antiquity's greatest unanswered questions. Other secret groups worshipped Dionysus through ecstatic rituals involving music, dance, and altered states of consciousness. These ceremonies often blurred the boundary between ordinary reality and spiritual experience. To outsiders, they appeared mysterious and sometimes frightening. Participants believed they were touching something divine, something existing beyond everyday existence. Then, there were the creatures. Greek mythology is famous for its monsters, yet some are stranger than they first appear. The Minotaur, half man and half bull, lived within an enormous labyrinth beneath Crete. The labyrinth itself is fascinating because it may have originated from memories of the vast and confusing palace complexes of the Minoan civilization. If so, the monster could represent a symbolic transformation of historical memory into myth. The Sphinx presents another mystery. Unlike many monsters that relied upon brute strength, the Sphinx challenged travelers with riddles. Knowledge, not weapons, determined survival. Such creatures seem less like animals and more like manifestations of psychological fears. Even more enigmatic were the sirens. Modern depictions often portray them as mermaids, but ancient. The sirens were among the most mysterious beings in all of Greek mythology. According to the legends, they lived on distant rocky islands surrounded by dangerous waters. Sailors who passed nearby would hear beautiful singing carried across the sea by the wind. The songs were said to be so enchanting that many sailors forgot everything else. They would stop paying attention to the waves, the rocks, and even their own safety. Drawn by curiosity and wonder, they would guide their ships closer and closer until disaster followed. What makes the story of the sirens so interesting is that their power was not physical strength. They did not hunt with claws or weapons. Instead, they tempted people with knowledge, dreams, and promises. Some stories suggest that the songs revealed hidden truths. Others say the songs simply offered whatever a listener desired most. Whatever the case, the legends have survived for thousands of years because they reflect something deeply human. Even today, people are often drawn toward things that seem beautiful or mysterious without fully understanding the danger that may lie beneath. The sea itself was one of the greatest sources of mystery in the ancient world. To the Greeks, the ocean was vast, unpredictable, and filled with unknown places. Most people would never travel far from home, meaning that distant lands often seemed almost magical. Strange stories returned, with sailors who claimed to have seen unusual islands, strange lights, giant creatures, and unexplained phenomena. Some of these tales were undoubtedly exaggerated. Others may have been inspired by real experiences that became more fantastic with each retelling. One of the strangest stories concerns a place known as the Island of the Lotus Eaters. According to legend, travelers who landed there discovered a plant with unusual properties. Anyone who ate it would lose the desire to return home. Memories faded, ambitions disappeared. The outside world no longer seemed important. Instead, people wished only to remain on the island forever. The story appears in the adventures of Odysseus, yet it raises an interesting question. Why did such a tale become popular? Some researchers believe it may have been inspired by encounters with unfamiliar plants in distant regions. Others think it served as a warning against temptation and complacency. Whatever its origin, the image of a forgotten island where people willingly abandon their past remains one of the most haunting ideas in mythology. Equally mysterious is the story of the sleeping cave of Endymion. According to the legend, Endymion was granted eternal sleep. Night after night, he remained unchanged while the world continued around him. The image is strangely peaceful and unsettling at the same time. Ancient storytellers often explored the thin boundary between sleep and death, viewing both as journeys into unknown realms. In many myths, dreams carried messages, warnings, or glimpses of hidden truths. The Greeks took dreams very seriously. Unlike modern societies, which often view dreams as random experiences of the mind, many ancient people believed dreams could reveal important information. Certain temples even offered places where visitors would sleep in hopes of receiving visions. Priests would then help interpret the messages. Not every dream was believed to come from the gods. Some were thought to originate from deeper and darker forces. This belief created an entire world of mystery surrounding sleep itself. What happens when consciousness fades? Why do dreams sometimes feel more real than waking life? These questions fascinated people thousands of years ago, just as they do today. Another curious mystery involves the Fates. These three ancient beings were believed to control the lives of all mortals. One spun the thread of life, another measured its length, and the third eventually cut it. Even the gods were said to respect their authority. This idea raises one of the oldest philosophical questions in human history. Do people truly control their own destiny, or are certain events already decided before they happen? Greek mythology never provides a clear answer. Instead, it presents countless stories in which individuals struggle against predictions, warnings, and signs, only to discover that the future unfolds in unexpected ways. Perhaps that uncertainty is precisely why these stories continue to resonate. Every generation asks the same questions about fate, choice, and chance. Far beyond the cities and temples, the ancient world was believed to contain places where reality itself seemed thinner. Sacred groves, hidden springs, lonely mountains, and remote caves often appeared in myths as gateways between worlds. Travelers who entered such places sometimes returned with extraordinary stories. Others never returned at all. Caves were especially important. To modern eyes, a cave may simply appear as a natural formation, but to many ancient Greeks, caves felt alive with mystery. They were dark, silent, and impossible to fully explore without light. Strange echoes emerged from within them. Underground rivers vanished into darkness. Some caves extended so deeply into the earth that people imagined they connected to the underworld itself. Archaeologists have discovered that many caves were indeed used as sacred locations. Offerings were left behind, rituals were performed. For centuries, people traveled to these hidden places, seeking guidance, healing, or contact with divine forces. Even today, entering a deep cave can create a powerful sense of wonder, making it easy to understand why ancient people associated them with mystery. One particularly strange theme appears again and again throughout Greek mythology: the idea that knowledge can be dangerous. In many stories, characters seek forbidden information only to suffer unexpected consequences. Curiosity leads them towards secrets they were never meant to uncover. Prometheus is perhaps the most famous example. According to the myth, he stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity. Fire represented far more than simple warmth. It symbolized knowledge, technology, and progress. For this act, Prometheus faced severe punishment. The story suggests that wisdom comes with a cost, a theme that appears repeatedly in myths from many cultures around the world. The ancient Greeks also told stories of hidden objects possessing unusual power. Some were magical weapons crafted by divine hands. Others were mysterious items connected to prophecies or ancient curses. While modern audiences often focus on the adventures themselves, the deeper mystery lies in why so many cultures created stories about powerful artifacts. Perhaps such objects represented humanity's desire to explain forces that seemed beyond ordinary understanding. Or perhaps they reflected something even older, memories transformed into legend over countless generations. As centuries passed, storytellers continued adding new layers to old myths. Different regions developed their own versions of familiar tales. Heroes changed, details shifted, entire episodes appeared or disappeared. This process created one of the greatest mysteries surrounding Greek mythology itself. How much of the original story still survives? The earliest versions were spoken long before they were written down. Generations of storytellers passed them from one person to another. Every retelling introduced subtle changes. By the time the myths reached us, they had already traveled through hundreds of years of human memory. Because of this, Greek mythology resembles a vast puzzle with many missing pieces. We possess fragments of ancient poems, damaged inscriptions, references in lost books, and stories preserved by later writers. Yet countless details have vanished forever. In a way, this uncertainty is part of what makes the mythology so captivating. Complete answers are rare. Every mystery seems to lead toward another mystery. Every explanation reveals another question. The deeper one travels into the legends of ancient Greece, the more difficult it becomes to separate history from imagination, fact from symbolism, and memory from myth. Perhaps that is why these stories continue to endure after thousands of years. They speak to something timeless within human nature. We are curious creatures. We look toward distant horizons. We wonder what lies beyond the mountains, beneath the sea, or hidden among the stars. We search for lost cities, forgotten knowledge, and answers to questions that may never be fully resolved. And somewhere within the shadows of Greek mythology, among the ruins of vanished kingdoms, the whispers of forgotten gods, the echoes of ancient prophecies, and the endless mysteries of the sea, those questions continue to wait patiently, just as they have for thousands of years. As the ancient world grew older, the mysteries of Greek mythology continued to expand. New stories appeared, old stories changed, and some mysteries became even more difficult to explain. Among the strangest questions is why so many myths seem to describe events that feel almost real. While few people today believe that gods literally walked among humans, many myths contain details that sound as though they were inspired by actual places, actual disasters, and actual experiences that were slowly transformed into legend over many generations. One example can be found in the countless stories about floods. Long before modern science explained the history of the planet, people around the world told stories about great floods that changed everything. The Greeks were no exception. According to one legend, humanity once became so corrupt that Zeus decided to cleanse the world. Heavy rains fell without end. Rivers overflowed. The land disappeared beneath rising waters. Almost everyone perished. Only a few survived. The story tells of a man and woman who escaped the disaster and eventually helped begin a new chapter of human history. While the details differ from flood stories found elsewhere, the similarities are difficult to ignore. For centuries, historians have wondered whether such myths preserve distant memories of real natural disasters. Ancient communities often lived near rivers and coastlines. Floods could destroy entire settlements. Over time, memories of local catastrophes may have merged into stories of world-changing events. The same possibility exists with earthquakes. The Greeks lived in a region where earthquakes were common. Entire cities could be damaged within moments. Mountains shifted, coastlines changed. To people who did not understand tectonic forces, such events must have felt deeply mysterious. It is not surprising that they connected earthquakes to the actions of gods. Poseidon is best known as the god of the sea, but he was also associated with earthquakes. In some stories, he strikes the earth with his trident and causes the ground to tremble. The connection is fascinating because it reveals how ancient people tried to make sense of powerful natural forces. When the earth suddenly shook beneath their feet, they searched for explanations. Mythology provided answers where science could not. The night sky offered another source of endless mystery. Far from the bright lights of modern cities, the ancient Greeks could see thousands of stars spread across the darkness. The sky appeared alive with patterns, movements, and wonders. To them, the stars were not distant suns. They were part of a grand cosmic story. Many constellations were linked to myths. Heroes, monsters, animals, and legendary figures were believed to have been placed among the stars. These stories helped people understand the heavens while also preserving important cultural traditions. Yet some mysteries remain. Why did certain patterns become associated with particular stories? Why did similar themes appear in cultures separated by great distances? Even today, researchers continue exploring how ancient civilizations interpreted the sky. Some believe astronomy played a much larger role in mythology than is commonly understood. Certain myths may contain hidden references to celestial events, seasonal changes, or the movement of stars across the centuries. One of the most intriguing figures connected to the stars is Orion. According to legend, Orion was a mighty hunter whose adventures eventually led to his placement among the constellations. Different versions of the story exist, each offering slightly different explanations. Some portray him as a hero, others describe him as arrogant and reckless. What remains consistent is the idea that his story became permanently connected to the night sky. This transformation appears throughout Greek mythology. Mortals, animals, and even objects are often placed among the stars. Such stories suggest that the Greeks viewed the heavens as more than a physical space. The sky was a vast canvas upon which memory, myth, and mystery could be preserved forever. Not all mysteries came from above. Some emerged from the depths of the earth. Ancient mines, caves, and underground passages inspired many strange legends. Darkness has always carried a unique power over the human imagination. When visibility disappears, ordinary objects become uncertain. Sounds seem louder. Distances become difficult to judge. It is easy to understand why underground places became associated with hidden forces and forgotten beings. Many myths describe entrances to the underworld as physical locations scattered across the landscape. Certain caves were believed to lead directly into the realm of the dead. Travelers approached such places with caution and respect. Whether anyone truly believed they could enter another world is difficult to know, but the stories reveal a deep fascination with what might exist beyond the visible world. Another recurring mystery involves voices. Throughout mythology, people hear whispers, warnings, prophecies, and messages from unseen sources. Sometimes the voices come from gods. Sometimes they emerge from sacred locations. At other times, they appear in dreams. The importance of these voices reflects a reality of ancient life. Without modern communication, unexpected information often seemed almost magical. A traveler arriving from a distant land could bring news of events hundreds of miles away. A dream might appear to predict something that later happened. Coincidences could feel meaningful. Over time, stories accumulated around these experiences, creating a rich tradition of mysterious messages and hidden knowledge. Perhaps one of the most unusual examples is the story of Cassandra. She was gifted with the ability to see the future. At first, such a gift might seem wonderful. Yet the blessing came with a terrible condition. Although her predictions were accurate, nobody would believe her warnings. Again and again she saw disasters approaching. Again and again she tried to help. Again and again she was ignored. The story remains powerful because it touches upon a universal fear. What if someone knew the truth but could never convince others to listen? The legend of Cassandra feels surprisingly modern, despite being thousands of years old. The ancient Greeks were also fascinated by the idea of transformation. People became animals, animals became stars. Humans became trees, rivers, mountains, or birds. These transformations appear so frequently that they almost form a category of mystery all their own. Why were ancient storytellers so drawn to such ideas? Perhaps transformation symbolized change itself. Life is filled with unexpected shifts. Childhood becomes adulthood. Seasons change. Cities rise and fall. Loved ones come and go. The world never remains exactly the same. Through mythology, these realities could be expressed in dramatic and memorable ways. Among the most famous stories is that of a young woman who was transformed into a laurel tree. Another tells of a man who flew too close to the sun. Yet another describes sailors changed into dolphins. These tales blur the boundary between reality and imagination, creating a world where anything seems possible. And perhaps that sense of possibility is one reason the myths survived. Ancient Greece was filled with uncertainty. The sea was dangerous. Disease was common. Travel was difficult. The future often seemed unpredictable. In such a world, mythology provided more than entertainment. It offered meaning. Stories helped explain why storms arrived. Stories explained why crops failed. Stories explained why people dreamed. Stories explained why suffering existed. Even when answers were incomplete, they helped make the unknown feel slightly less frightening. Yet some mysteries resisted explanation. Among them were the strange stories of hidden treasures. Legends spoke of sacred objects buried in forgotten places, protected by monsters, curses, or impossible challenges. Heroes frequently embarked on journeys to recover these treasures, only to discover that the true challenge was not finding the object itself, but understanding its significance. The famous Golden Fleece is one example. At first glance, it appears to be a magical prize sought by adventurers. Yet historians have long debated its possible origins. Some suggest that real techniques used to collect gold from rivers may have inspired the story. Others see symbolic meanings connected to kingship, power, or divine favor. As with so many myths, certainty remains out of reach, and perhaps that is exactly where the magic lives. A mystery loses something once it is completely solved. Greek mythology has survived because it leaves room for wonder. Every answer seems to open another door. Every explanation reveals another possibility. The farther we travel into these ancient stories, the more we encounter questions that have lingered for thousands of years. Were some myths inspired by real events? Did certain legends preserve fragments of forgotten history? Were sacred places chosen for reasons now lost to time? How many stories disappeared forever before they could be written down? No one knows, and perhaps no one ever will. What remains is a vast collection of legends standing between history and imagination. Within them are echoes of ancient fears, ancient hopes, and ancient attempts to understand a world that often felt mysterious beyond measure. As night deepens over the mountains, forests, islands, and temples of mythological Greece, the old questions remain. They drift through the stories like distant echoes carried by the wind. The names of heroes may fade, great cities may crumble into ruins, temples may fall silent, but mystery endures. And somewhere in the darkness of those ancient tales, countless secrets still wait to be discovered. As the night continues and the world of ancient Greece grows quieter, it becomes easier to imagine how these stories were first told. Long before books existed, before libraries were built, and before scholars carefully copied texts onto scrolls, people gathered beneath the stars and shared stories by firelight. The darkness beyond the flames seemed endless. The sea was mysterious. The forests were mysterious. The mountains were mysterious. In many ways, the world itself felt far more mysterious than it does today. Perhaps that is why mythology became such an important part of life. The stories helped people navigate a world filled with uncertainty. Yet some mysteries remained so strange that even the myths could not fully explain them. One of these mysteries involved places that seemed abandoned by time. Throughout Greece, travelers occasionally encountered ancient ruins whose origins were already forgotten. Massive stone walls stood on lonely hillsides. Broken temples rested among overgrown fields. Strange structures appeared older than anyone could remember. To modern archaeologists, such ruins provide clues about lost civilizations. But to people living thousands of years ago, these places often seemed impossible to explain. Who built them? When were they built? Why were they abandoned? Without reliable records, myths stepped in to fill the gaps. Some ruins were said to have been created by giants. Others were believed to be the work of gods. Certain walls were considered so impressive that people refused to believe ordinary humans could have constructed them. This idea appears in several ancient traditions. Whenever people encounter evidence of a forgotten past, imagination naturally begins to fill the empty spaces left behind by missing knowledge. The same process may have contributed to the stories surrounding giants. Greek mythology contains numerous references to enormous beings. Some fought against the gods, others lived in distant lands. A few appeared only briefly before disappearing from the stories altogether. The giants are interesting because they often represent something more than physical size. They symbolize ancient forces, old powers, and forgotten ages that existed before the familiar world took shape. In many myths, the victory of the gods over giants marks the transition from chaos to order. But this raises an intriguing question. Why did so many ancient cultures tell stories about previous ages populated by powerful beings? Perhaps these myths reflect humanity's tendency to imagine the past as larger and more extraordinary than the present. People often look backward and picture lost golden ages, forgotten kingdoms, and remarkable ancestors. Or perhaps the stories emerged from ancient discoveries that seemed impossible to explain. The truth remains uncertain. Another fascinating mystery concerns the relationship between mythology and memory. Human memory is not perfect. Even today, people remember events differently. Details change over time. Small misunderstandings grow larger with every retelling. Imagine what happens over hundreds of years. A real event occurs. Someone tells the story. Their children repeat it. Their grandchildren repeat it again. Generation after generation adds new details, removes others, and adapts the tale to fit changing times. Eventually, history and mythology begin to blend together. At that point, separating fact from fiction becomes nearly impossible. Some researchers believe this process may explain why certain myths feel strangely realistic despite containing supernatural elements. Perhaps somewhere beneath the layers of storytelling lie fragments of genuine memories. A flood becomes a world-ending catastrophe. A king becomes a legendary hero. An enemy becomes a monster. A distant land becomes a magical kingdom. Over centuries, reality slowly transforms into myth. This possibility becomes especially interesting when examining stories connected to the Trojan War. For many years, scholars debated whether the war described in ancient poems actually happened. Some believed it was entirely fictional. Then something remarkable occurred. Archaeologists uncovered evidence of an ancient city matching many aspects of Troy. While the discoveries did not prove every detail of the myths, they demonstrated that at least some parts of the story may have roots in real events. The findings served as an important reminder. Sometimes myths preserve more truth than people expect. At the same time, they also preserve imagination, symbolism, and countless additions accumulated over generations. This mixture of truth and mystery gives mythology much of its lasting power. The ancient Greeks were also fascinated by unusual objects believed to possess special significance. Certain stones were considered sacred. Certain trees became associated with divine forces. Certain springs attracted pilgrims from distant lands. To modern observers, these objects may appear ordinary. Yet, throughout history, humans have often attached meaning to particular places and things. A tree survives a storm. A spring appears unusually clear. A stone sits in a striking location. Gradually, stories form around them. Eventually, the place becomes sacred. Over enough time, people may forget how the tradition began, while continuing to preserve it. This process creates mysteries within mysteries. Not only do we wonder about the myths themselves, but we also wonder about the origins of the myths. Another recurring theme involves doors, gates, and boundaries. Greek mythology often describes locations that separate one world from another. A cave leads underground, a river divides the living from the dead, a mountain marks the edge of known territory, a doorway opens into a sacred space. These boundaries appear again and again because they reflect something fundamental about human experience. People naturally divide the world into categories: known and unknown, safe and dangerous, home and wilderness, life and death. Myths transform these invisible boundaries into physical locations that heroes can cross. Yet crossing such boundaries is rarely easy. Travelers are tested, warnings are ignored, choices carry consequences. The journey itself becomes a source of mystery. One particularly interesting aspect of Greek mythology is the way ordinary locations sometimes become extraordinary. A forest is not simply a forest. A spring is not simply a spring. An island is not simply an island. At any moment, a hidden secret might reveal itself. A god might appear. A prophecy might be spoken. A strange creature might emerge. This constant sense of possibility gives the myths a dreamlike quality. The world feels alive. Anything can happen. Perhaps this reflects how ancient people experienced reality. Without modern explanations for many natural phenomena, everyday life contained far more uncertainty. Unexpected events seemed meaningful. Coincidences seemed significant. The boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary was often much thinner than it appears today. The stars above provided another endless source of wonder. Night after night, people observed the same patterns moving across the sky. Some stars remained fixed, others wandered. Certain events occurred with remarkable regularity. Ancient observers became skilled at tracking these movements, yet many questions remained unanswered. What were the stars? Why did they move? How far away were they? The myths offered explanations, but they also preserved the mystery itself. Even now, after centuries of scientific discovery, many people still feel a sense of awe when looking up at a clear night sky. The questions may have changed, but the wonder remains. As the ancient world drifted through the centuries, countless stories appeared and disappeared. Some became famous, others were forgotten. A few survived only as fragments. Perhaps a single sentence quoted by another writer. Perhaps a damaged inscription on stone. Perhaps a brief reference in a lost manuscript. These fragments are among the most mysterious remnants of Greek mythology. They hint at stories we can never fully reconstruct. A hero whose adventures are unknown. A creature whose description is incomplete. A prophecy whose ending has vanished. Like pieces of a puzzle scattered across time, they remind us how much has been lost. And yet, despite all these losses, an astonishing amount has survived. Enough stories remain to fill countless books. Enough mysteries remain to inspire endless curiosity. Enough questions remain to keep people fascinated thousands of years after the myths were first told. Perhaps that is the true secret of Greek mythology. It is not a collection of answers. It is a collection of questions. Questions about the world, questions about human nature, questions about destiny, knowledge, life, death, and the unknown. The stories endure because the questions endure, And as long as people continue wondering what lies beyond the next horizon, beyond the next mountain, beyond the darkness at the edge of the firelight, the mysteries of Greek mythology will continue to live on, quietly waiting for the next listener, willing to follow them into the shadows of the ancient world. As the hours pass and the ancient world settles deeper into silence, another mystery begins to emerge from the shadows of Greek mythology. It is not the mystery of a lost city, a forgotten god, or a hidden treasure. It is the mystery of fear itself. The people of ancient Greece lived in a world that often felt unpredictable. Storms could arrive without warning, crops could fail, ships could disappear at sea, disease could spread through entire communities. In many ways, everyday life contained dangers that modern people rarely experience. Because of this, myths often served another purpose beyond storytelling. They gave shape to fear. Instead of fearing an unknown storm, people could imagine a powerful force behind it. Instead of fearing the darkness, they could fill it with stories. Instead of fearing the future, they could search for signs and prophecies. In a strange way, mysteries become easier to face when they have a name. One of the most powerful fears in Greek mythology was the fear of the unknown sea. Today, satellites map nearly every coastline on Earth. Ships cross oceans with advanced navigation systems. Weather forecasts provide warnings days in advance. Ancient sailors had none of these advantages. When they sailed beyond the sight of land, they entered a world filled with uncertainty. The sea could be calm in the morning and deadly by nightfall. Fog could hide entire islands. Storms could appear without warning. Even experienced sailors often had no way of knowing what waited beyond the horizon. It is easy to understand why so many sea legends emerged from such an environment. Every voyage carried the possibility of encountering something unexpected. A strange animal, an unusual weather event, an unfamiliar coastline, a mysterious light in the distance. Each experience could become the foundation of a new story. Over generations, these stories grew. Some became legends, others became myths. Eventually, they became part of the shared imagination of an entire civilization. Another mystery that fascinated the Greeks was luck. Why do fortunate events happen to some people and not others? Why does one traveler survive a disaster while another does not? Why does success seem to arrive unexpectedly for some and remain forever out of reach for others? These questions are still discussed today. Ancient mythology often approached them through the idea of fate and fortune. Certain people appeared blessed, others appeared cursed. Sometimes, a single decision changed everything. At other times, events seemed completely beyond human control. The myths rarely provide simple answers. Instead, they present a world where chance and destiny constantly interact in ways that remain difficult to understand. This uncertainty gives many stories a surprisingly realistic quality. Life itself often feels unpredictable. The Greeks understood that, and they transformed that understanding into mythology. Dreams remained another endless source of mystery. Imagine living in a world where science offers no clear explanation for dreaming. Each night, people close their eyes and enter strange landscapes. They meet individuals who are far away. They visit impossible places. They witness events that have never occurred. Sometimes dreams seem meaningless. Other times, they feel deeply important. Ancient people naturally wondered where dreams came from. Were they messages, warnings, memories, glimpses of the future? The myths contain countless examples of dreams influencing major events. Kings make decisions because of dreams. Travelers change direction because of dreams. Heroes receive warnings through dreams. Even today, dreams remain mysterious despite centuries of study. The ancient fascination with them has never completely disappeared. Perhaps one of the strangest mysteries in Greek mythology involves echoes. Many stories mention voices repeating through valleys, caves, and mountains. One famous tale tells of a figure whose voice could only repeat the words of others. The story is often interpreted as a lesson about longing and loneliness. Yet it may also reflect the wonder ancient people felt when encountering natural echoes. Imagine hearing your own voice return from a distant cliff. Without understanding the science behind sound waves, the experience could feel almost supernatural. Simple observations often became the seeds from which myths grew. The same pattern appears again and again. A natural phenomenon inspires curiosity. Curiosity inspires a story. The story survives long enough to become mythology. One reason Greek mythology remains so fascinating is that it preserves traces of how ancient people viewed the world around them. The myths are not merely stories. They are windows into human imagination. Another mystery appears in the legends surrounding hidden knowledge. Throughout mythology, certain individuals possess information unavailable to others. Wise figures appear unexpectedly. Prophets deliver cryptic messages. Travelers discover secrets in distant places. The search for hidden knowledge is one of the oldest themes in human history. People naturally want to understand more than they currently know. What lies beyond the mountains? What lies beneath the earth? What lies among the stars? Every generation asks these questions. The Greeks were no different. In many myths, the pursuit of knowledge leads to remarkable discoveries. But it can also lead to danger. This balance appears repeatedly. Knowledge brings power. Knowledge brings understanding. Yet knowledge can also bring responsibility and consequences. Perhaps the stories suggest that wisdom requires caution. Or perhaps they simply acknowledge that every answer creates new questions. The forests of ancient Greece also played an important role in mythology. Unlike cities, forests felt wild and unpredictable. Paths disappeared among the trees. Strange sounds echoed through the darkness. Animals moved unseen among the shadows. A traveler entering a forest could easily feel separated from the familiar world. For this reason, forests often became settings for unusual encounters. Heroes meet mysterious strangers. Gods appear in disguise. Unexpected events change the course of entire lives. The forest becomes a place where ordinary rules no longer apply. Even now, deep forests possess a certain atmosphere that can be difficult to describe. The silence feels different. The darkness feels deeper. The world feels older. Ancient storytellers understood this feeling and used it to create some of their most memorable tales. Then there is the mystery of memory itself. Why do certain stories survive while others disappear? Why do some legends remain popular for thousands of years? The answer may lie in the questions they explore. People continue returning to myths because the themes remain familiar. Fear, hope, love, loss, curiosity, wonder. These experiences are timeless. Technology changes, empires rise and fall, languages evolve, Yet human nature remains surprisingly consistent. The ancient Greeks worried about many of the same things people worry about today. They wondered about the future. They wondered about death. They wondered about happiness. They wondered about meaning. Their myths provided a way to explore these questions through stories. And stories are often easier to remember than explanations. A lesson may be forgotten, a story may survive forever. Perhaps that is why Greek mythology continues to endure. Not because every listener believes the stories literally happened, but because the mysteries hidden within them still feel relevant. The world remains full of unanswered questions. The night sky remains vast. The oceans remain deep. The future remains uncertain. And somewhere within that uncertainty, mythology continues to find a home. As another quiet night settles over the ancient mountains, forgotten temples, and distant islands of Greece, the old stories continue their journey through time. They pass from one generation to the next. They cross centuries. They survive wars, disasters, and the rise and fall of civilizations. And through it all, they carry the same mysteries that first inspired them long ago. Mysteries about the world, mysteries about the unknown, and perhaps most importantly, mysteries about ourselves. For in the end, every myth is also a reflection of what people fear, a reflection of what people hope for, a reflection of the endless human desire to understand a universe that remains, even now, far more mysterious than we often realize. As the centuries passed, many of the mysteries of Greek mythology became quieter. The great battles between gods and monsters remained famous. But hidden beneath those stories were older questions that no one seemed able to answer. Some of them were so ancient that even the Greeks themselves were unsure where the stories had come from. One of the most curious examples can be found in the myths surrounding ancient temples. Today, when people visit the ruins scattered across Greece, they often see broken columns, weathered stone, and empty foundations. But in the ancient world, these places were alive. Lamps flickered in the darkness. Incense drifted through the air. Pilgrims arrived from distant lands carrying hopes, fears, and questions. Many people traveled enormous distances simply to ask for guidance. They wanted to know whether a journey would be successful, whether a war would be won, or whether an important decision would bring prosperity or disaster. What is interesting is not only that people sought answers, but that they often accepted answers that were vague and mysterious. A prophecy rarely gave a clear direction. Instead, it might offer a strange sentence or a symbolic warning. Only later would people try to understand what it meant. Sometimes the prediction appeared accurate. Sometimes it did not. Yet the mystery remained powerful. Perhaps people were not searching for certainty at all. Perhaps they were searching for meaning. Even today, human beings often find comfort in the idea that events happen for a reason, even when the reason is unclear. The ancient Greeks were no different. This desire to find meaning can also be seen in the stories they told about coincidence. A traveler takes a different road than usual and avoids danger. A dream seems to predict an event. A chance encounter changes someone's entire future. Moments like these happen in every age. The difference is that ancient people often interpreted them as signs. To them, the world was filled with messages waiting to be understood. A bird crossing the sky at the right moment might be meaningful. An unusual sound might carry a warning. A sudden storm could be interpreted as a signal from forces beyond human understanding. Whether those beliefs were correct is impossible to know, but they reveal something important about the ancient imagination. The world felt alive. Nothing was entirely random. Everything seemed connected to something larger. This idea appears again and again throughout Greek mythology. Heroes rarely stumble into adventures by accident. Their journeys often begin with a sign, a prophecy, or a strange event that seems small at first but gradually reveals a deeper significance. Looking back, it is easy to see why these stories became so popular. Life often feels confusing while it is happening. Only afterward do people connect events together and discover patterns. The myths simply turned that experience into storytelling. Another mystery that quietly runs through many Greek legends is the feeling that something important has been lost. Again and again, myths describe earlier ages that were somehow better than the present. The world was more magical. The gods were closer. Heroes were greater. Wonderful places existed that could no longer be found. This theme appears so often that it almost feels like a memory. Of course, it is probably not a memory in the literal sense. Yet many cultures throughout history have imagined a lost golden age. Perhaps this happens because people naturally look toward the past with a sense of nostalgia. Or perhaps every generation feels that something valuable has disappeared. Whatever the reason, Greek mythology is filled with stories about things that once existed but are now gone. Lost kingdoms, lost knowledge, lost treasures, lost ages. The mystery of loss gives many myths a surprisingly emotional quality. They are not simply stories about discovery. They are often stories about remembering and sometimes about forgetting. One of the most haunting examples involves places that cannot be found again. A traveler reaches a strange island. Everything seems peaceful. The landscape feels almost unreal. Then, after leaving, the traveler spends years trying to return. The island is never seen again. Stories like this appear in different forms throughout mythology. They carry a dreamlike quality that is difficult to explain. Many people have experienced something similar in their own lives. A moment feels important, a place feels magical. Yet when they try to revisit it later, the feeling is gone. The location remains, but something has changed. The myths capture this strange sensation remarkably well. Perhaps that is why they continue to resonate. They are not only stories about gods and heroes. They are stories about human experience. As night deepened over the ancient Mediterranean, sailors often found themselves surrounded by darkness, unlike anything most people experience today. Far from shore, with no cities visible on the horizon, the sea and sky could blend together into a single, endless expanse. Above them stretched thousands of stars. Below them lay unknown depths. In such moments, it would have been easy to feel very small. Many myths seem to emerge from this feeling. The universe appeared enormous. Human life appeared brief. Questions seemed larger than answers. The Greeks responded by creating stories that helped them explore those questions. Not solve them, explore them. That distinction is important. Modern readers sometimes search myths for explanations. Ancient listeners may have been searching for something else. They may have been searching for perspective, a way of understanding their place within a world that often felt mysterious and unpredictable. The more one studies Greek mythology, the more this becomes apparent. The stories rarely eliminate uncertainty. Instead, they invite people to sit with uncertainty, to think about it, to wonder about it, to accept that some mysteries may never be fully explained. This attitude appears especially clearly in the stories about the future. Many heroes spend their lives trying to learn what lies ahead. Yet even when they succeed, the knowledge rarely provides peace. Sometimes it creates new problems. Sometimes it creates fear. Sometimes it changes decisions in unexpected ways. The lesson seems almost timeless. Knowing the future is not the same as understanding it, and understanding it is not the same as controlling it. As the old storytellers passed these tales from one generation to another, they preserved more than legends. They preserved questions, questions about destiny, questions about memory, questions about loss, questions about the unknown. Thousands of years later, those same questions still feel familiar. The temples may be silent now. The ancient kingdoms may be gone. The people who first told these stories have long since disappeared. Yet the mysteries remain. They drift through the myths like distant echoes, never fully revealing themselves, never fully disappearing. And perhaps that is exactly why the stories have survived for so long. A mystery that is completely solved eventually comes to an end. A mystery that remains unanswered can travel through centuries, carried by curiosity alone, waiting for another listener, willing to follow it a little deeper into the shadows of the ancient world. There was another mystery that quietly existed beneath many of the stories told in ancient Greece, and it was not connected to gods, monsters, or great heroes. It was the mystery of what people chose to believe. The ancient world was filled with uncertainty, and for most people, there was no easy way to explain unusual events. A strange light might appear over the sea during the night. An unexplained sound might echo through the mountains. A traveler could return home with stories of distant lands that nobody else had ever seen. In a world where information moved slowly and knowledge was limited, such experiences naturally became surrounded by mystery. Over time, stories grew larger. A strange animal became a monster. A distant island became a legendary kingdom. A powerful ruler became a hero whose strength seemed impossible. This process happened again and again, slowly transforming ordinary events into extraordinary legends. What makes Greek mythology so fascinating is that it often feels as though we are looking through several layers at once. Beneath the stories of gods and magical creatures, there are hints of real human experiences. There are traces of curiosity, fear, wonder, and imagination. The myths seem to preserve not only the stories themselves, but also the emotions that created them. When ancient people looked out at the sea and wondered what lay beyond the horizon, that sense of curiosity became part of the legends. When they stood beneath a sky filled with stars and asked questions they could not answer, those questions found their way into mythology as well. Many of the oldest myths also carry a strange feeling that the world was once different than it is now. Again and again, stories speak of distant ages when powerful beings walked the earth, when extraordinary events seemed more common, and when the boundary between the human world and something greater appeared much thinner. It is difficult to know exactly why this idea became so popular, but it appears throughout countless legends. Perhaps people have always imagined the past as a more mysterious place. Every generation looks backward and wonders whether something valuable has been lost. Ancient ruins may have contributed to this feeling. A person standing before a massive stone structure whose builders were long forgotten would naturally begin asking questions. If nobody remembered who created it, Imagination could easily step in and provide answers. Over time, those answers became stories, and those stories became myths. Even today, there is something deeply compelling about forgotten places. A ruined temple hidden among hills, an abandoned settlement reclaimed by nature, or a weathered monument standing alone beneath the sky, all create a sense of mystery that is difficult to describe. The Greeks felt that mystery too, and they often expressed it through legends about vanished kingdoms, lost knowledge, and civilizations that seemed to disappear without explanation. Perhaps that is why stories about Atlantis became so powerful and continued to survive long after countless other myths faded away. Atlantis represented more than a lost city. It represented the possibility that entire worlds could vanish while leaving behind only fragments of memory. The idea is both fascinating and unsettling. Human civilizations often feel permanent while they exist, yet history shows how quickly things can change. Cities rise and fall, empires expand and disappear, languages flourish and then vanish. The Greeks understood this better than many people realize. Their myths often contain reminders that even the greatest achievements are temporary. Powerful kings lose their kingdoms, wealth disappears, great cities become ruins. Yet while physical things fade, stories continue traveling through time. A city can disappear beneath the sea, but the legend of that city may survive for thousands of years. In that sense, mythology becomes a kind of memory. Not always an accurate memory, but a memory nonetheless. It preserves traces of what people feared, what they hoped for, and what they found impossible to forget. As the ancient storytellers passed these tales from one generation to the next, they were doing more than preserving entertainment. They were preserving wonder. They were preserving questions. Greek mythology rarely offers complete certainty. Even the stories that appear straightforward often contain unanswered mysteries hidden beneath the surface. Was a particular event real? Was a monster inspired by an actual creature? Did a distant legend originate from a forgotten historical event? The answers are often impossible to determine. Yet that uncertainty may be exactly what gives the myths their lasting power. A mystery that has been fully solved eventually loses some of its magic. Greek mythology has survived because it remains unfinished in a way. There are still questions waiting to be asked. There are still connections waiting to be discovered. There are still stories whose origins remain hidden somewhere in the darkness of the distant past. And as long as people continue looking toward the unknown with curiosity, those ancient mysteries will continue to feel alive, carrying the imagination of countless generations across thousands of years and into the present day. As the ancient world continued to change, there were countless mysteries that never found clear answers. And perhaps one of the most interesting was the mystery of how stories themselves survived. Long before historians carefully recorded events, and long before libraries attempted to preserve knowledge, stories existed only in memory. A tale could travel hundreds of miles without ever being written down. It could pass through dozens of villages, across mountains, through ports filled with sailors, and into cities where thousands of people heard it. Along the way, small details changed. A description became slightly more dramatic. A hero became slightly stronger. A journey became slightly longer. Over enough time, those changes accumulated until the story transformed into something entirely new. What began as a simple account of an unusual event might eventually become a myth involving gods, prophecies, and impossible adventures. This process fascinates historians because it means that somewhere inside many legends, there may be fragments of reality hidden beneath centuries of imagination. Yet finding those fragments is often impossible. The original story has usually vanished, leaving behind only the final form that survived. Greek mythology is filled with such mysteries. We encounter stories that feel ancient even by ancient standards, stories that seem to come from a time before anyone knew who first told them. They emerge from the darkness of history already fully formed, carrying pieces of forgotten worlds that can no longer be examined directly. This sense of distance is especially noticeable when reading myths connected to places that seem almost unreachable. The Greeks often spoke about remote islands, hidden valleys, and distant lands that existed somewhere beyond ordinary experience. What is remarkable is how often these locations appear surrounded by uncertainty. Travelers hear rumors about them, but rarely visit them. Sailors glimpse them from afar, but cannot reach them. Stories describe them in vivid detail, while remaining frustratingly vague about where they actually are. Such places occupy a strange position between reality and imagination. They feel real enough to inspire belief, yet mysterious enough to avoid verification. In many ways, they resemble the unknown regions that once appeared on ancient maps. Whenever knowledge ended, possibility began. People naturally filled the empty spaces with stories. Some imagined kingdoms overflowing with wealth. Others imagined forgotten civilizations preserving ancient wisdom. Still others imagined lands where the ordinary rules of life no longer applied. These legends reveal something important about human nature. People have always been fascinated by the idea that somewhere beyond the familiar world, there might be something extraordinary waiting to be discovered. Even today, despite satellites, airplanes, and modern technology, that feeling has not entirely disappeared. It has simply shifted toward different frontiers. The ancient Greeks searched beyond the horizon because the horizon represented possibility itself. The same curiosity appears in myths about hidden knowledge. Throughout Greek mythology, there is a recurring sense that certain truths exist just beyond human reach. Heroes seek answers, kings consult prophets, travelers visit sacred places, hoping to learn something that others do not know. Yet complete understanding always seems slightly out of reach. The answers they receive are often incomplete, symbolic, or difficult to interpret. This pattern appears so frequently that it almost seems intentional. The myths suggest that knowledge is valuable, but they also suggest that certainty is rare. The world remains mysterious no matter how much one learns about it. Even the wisest characters often struggle to understand events unfolding around them. They make decisions based on limited information. They misunderstand warnings. They overlook important details. In this way, mythology mirrors real life surprisingly well. People rarely possess perfect knowledge. They move through the world, making choices with incomplete information, hoping their understanding is sufficient. The Greeks transformed this reality into stories that continue to feel relevant thousands of years later. Another fascinating aspect of Greek mythology is the way it treats time. Modern people often imagine history as a sequence of events moving steadily from past to present. Mythology rarely feels that simple. The past often appears alive, almost as though it continues influencing the present long after it should have disappeared. Ancient heroes remain important centuries after their deaths. Forgotten events continue shaping new stories. Old prophecies echo through generations. It is as though time itself behaves differently within mythology. The boundary between past and present becomes blurred. A decision made long ago can suddenly affect someone living much later. An ancient promise can remain significant for hundreds of years. A forgotten mistake can return unexpectedly. This gives many myths a dreamlike quality. Events seem connected across enormous distances of time in ways that feel mysterious yet strangely believable. Anyone who has studied history understands that the past never completely disappears. Decisions made generations ago continue shaping the present. Traditions survive, stories survive, ideas survive. Greek mythology expresses this truth through narratives that connect people separated by centuries. The mystery of memory becomes especially important when considering how the Greeks viewed their own past. Many myths describe earlier ages that seem larger than life. Heroes are stronger, journeys are grander, challenges are greater. The world itself feels more magical. Some historians believe this reflects a common human tendency to imagine the past as more extraordinary than the present. Yet, there may be something deeper involved. The ancient Greeks inherited stories from cultures that existed before them. Civilizations rose and fell throughout the Mediterranean long before the classical age of Greece emerged. Fragments of older beliefs, older traditions, and older memories may have survived within mythology long after their original meanings were forgotten. Imagine hearing a story that has been repeated for 1,000 years. The names may survive, certain events may survive. Yet the reason the story began could be completely lost. What remains is a mystery wrapped inside a legend. Greek mythology contains countless examples of such mysteries. They remind us that the ancient world was already looking backward toward an even more ancient past. Perhaps nowhere is this feeling stronger than in stories connected to abandoned places. Throughout history, people have encountered ruins whose origins they could not explain. Massive stones stand in silent fields. Ancient walls stretch across hillsides. Temples crumble beneath the sun. When knowledge disappears, imagination often steps forward to fill the gap. A forgotten fortress becomes the home of giants. An unusual structure becomes the work of divine beings. A mysterious location becomes associated with a legend. The Greeks were no exception. They inherited landscapes filled with traces of older civilizations, and those traces naturally inspired questions. Sometimes the myths seem almost like conversations between people and the ruins surrounding them. The stones remain silent, but stories provide answers. Whether those answers are correct is another matter entirely. What matters is that they reveal a deep human desire to understand the past. As darkness settles over the mountains and coastlines of mythological Greece, it becomes easier to imagine why these stories survived for so long. They offered more than entertainment. They offered a way of thinking about uncertainty. The world was filled with things people could not explain. Storms arrived unexpectedly. Dreams carried strange images. Fortunes changed without warning. Great cities rose and fell. People searched for meaning wherever they could find it. Mythology became one of the tools they used to explore those mysteries, not necessarily to solve them, but to live alongside them. That distinction may be one of the most important lessons hidden within the ancient stories. The myths rarely eliminate uncertainty. Instead, they teach listeners how to exist within a mysterious world. They encourage curiosity rather than certainty. They suggest that wonder has value even when answers remain unavailable. Thousands of years later, that perspective still feels surprisingly relevant. Modern knowledge has explained many things that once seemed impossible to understand, yet mystery remains an unavoidable part of human existence. There are still questions without answers. There are still places that inspire wonder. There are still stories whose origins remain hidden beyond reach. And perhaps that is why Greek mythology continues to captivate the imagination. Beneath the tales of gods and heroes lies something timeless, the recognition that the world is larger, stranger, and more mysterious than it first appears, and that some of its greatest secrets may forever remain just beyond the horizon. If someone had stood on a rocky shoreline in ancient Greece during a quiet night and looked out across the dark water, it would have been easy to understand why mystery played such a central role in everyday life. The sea stretched endlessly into the darkness, hiding distant lands, unseen creatures, and possibilities that few people would ever experience firsthand. During the day, the horizon already seemed unreachable. At night, it became something even more mysterious. The boundary between the sea and the sky almost disappeared, leaving only darkness and the faint glow of stars reflected on the waves. For many people, the unknown was not an abstract idea. It existed just beyond sight. Every ship that vanished over the horizon seemed to enter another world. Some returned with incredible stories. Others never returned at all. In such an environment, imagination naturally flourished. Questions appeared everywhere. What lay beyond the distant waters? Were there islands nobody had ever mapped? Were there civilizations unknown to the Greek world? Could there be places where entirely different rules governed life? These questions inspired countless myths, and even though modern maps have filled many of those empty spaces, the fascination remains. Human beings continue to feel drawn toward what they do not fully understand. The Greeks simply expressed that curiosity through stories that survived long enough to become legends. One of the most interesting aspects of those legends is how often they focus on journeys rather than destinations. Many famous myths begin with someone leaving home and entering unfamiliar territory. The destination may be important, but the real mystery often lies in the journey itself. A traveler sets out expecting one thing and discovers something entirely different. Along the way, unexpected encounters occur. Strange signs appear. The ordinary world slowly transforms into something far more uncertain. This pattern appears so often that it begins to feel like a reflection of life itself. Few people know exactly where their choices will lead. The future remains hidden. Every decision creates new possibilities while closing others forever. The ancient storytellers understood this reality. Their heroes moved through landscapes filled with uncertainty because uncertainty is a fundamental part of being human. What makes these stories remarkable is that they rarely present uncertainty as purely negative. Instead, mystery becomes an invitation. The unknown may be dangerous, but it is also where discovery happens. Without uncertainty, there can be no adventure. Without unanswered questions, there can be no curiosity. In this way, mythology transforms fear of the unknown into something far more intriguing. There is also a strange feeling that runs through many Greek myths, a feeling that the world contains hidden layers beneath its visible surface. A traveler enters a forest and discovers something unexpected. A shepherd finds an ancient cave. A fisherman notices an unusual island in the distance. These moments appear repeatedly because they tap into a powerful idea, the belief that reality may contain secrets waiting to be uncovered. Ancient people lived much closer to unexplored landscapes than most modern populations. Large areas remained mysterious simply because few people had traveled through them. A mountain valley might be completely unknown to those living only a short distance away. A remote island could become the subject of endless speculation. In many ways, the physical world itself encouraged imagination. Every unexplored place created an opportunity for a story. Every hidden location invited questions. Even today, there is something compelling about discovering a place that feels forgotten or untouched. The experience creates a sense of wonder that is difficult to describe. Greek mythology captured that feeling remarkably well. Its stories often suggest that the world is larger than it appears, that mysteries may be hiding in places people pass every day without noticing them. The passage of time only deepened these mysteries. As generations came and went, stories accumulated layers. New details were added, while older details disappeared. Events became harder to verify. Characters grew more legendary. Eventually, people inherited stories that already felt ancient. Imagine listening to a tale that your grandparents heard from their grandparents, who in turn heard it from people living centuries earlier. The story carries a sense of authority simply because it has survived for so long. At the same time, its origins become impossible to trace. Nobody knows who first told it. Nobody knows how much has changed. Yet the story remains powerful precisely because it feels connected to something distant and mysterious. This process may explain why mythology often feels timeless. The stories seem detached from any specific moment in history. They exist in a world where centuries blend together and where memory becomes more important than chronology. The result is a collection of legends that feel both familiar and unreachable, as though they belong to a past that can never be fully recovered. Another reason these myths continue to captivate people is that they rarely provide complete closure. Modern storytelling often aims to answer questions by the end of the narrative. Greek mythology frequently does the opposite. Questions remain unanswered, mysteries linger, certain events are never fully explained. This can be frustrating for those seeking certainty, but it also gives the stories unusual depth. Real life rarely provides perfect conclusions. Questions remain, motives remain uncertain. Historical events are interpreted in different ways. The myths reflect this reality. They acknowledge that some things may never be completely understood. Rather than eliminating mystery, they preserve it. This preservation allows each generation to revisit the stories and discover something new. Different people focus on different questions. Historians search for clues about ancient cultures. Philosophers explore deeper meanings. Writers find inspiration. Ordinary readers simply enjoy the sense of wonder. The stories remain alive because they never stop inviting interpretation. Perhaps the most enduring mystery of all is why these ancient tales continue to matter. Thousands of years separate the modern world from the people who first told them. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen during that time. Technologies beyond anything the Greeks could imagine now shape everyday life. Yet the myths continue to attract attention. Part of the reason is undoubtedly their creativity, but there is something deeper involved as well. Beneath every story lies a question that still feels relevant. People continue wondering about fate, chance, memory, loss, and the unknown future. They continue searching for meaning in unexpected events. They continue imagining what might exist beyond the limits of current knowledge. In other words, the questions have survived even when the world around them has changed. Greek mythology endures because it speaks to forms of curiosity that seem permanent. The names, locations, and details may belong to the ancient world, but the wonder that created them belongs to every age. As long as human beings continue looking beyond the horizon and asking what might lie there, these stories will retain their power. They will continue whispering their mysteries across centuries, inviting new listeners into a world where answers are never guaranteed, and where curiosity itself becomes the greatest adventure of all. As the old stories continued traveling from one generation to the next, another mystery quietly grew around them. It was the mystery of belief. When modern people hear myths, they often imagine a clear line separating fact from fiction. The ancient world was rarely so simple. Different people believed different things, and many stories existed somewhere between history, religion, and legend. A person might not be completely certain that a particular event had happened exactly as described, yet still feel that the story contained an important truth. This way of thinking can be difficult to understand today, but it helps explain why myths survived for so long. They were not always judged by whether they were literally true. They were valued because they helped people understand themselves and the world around them. A tale about a hero overcoming impossible challenges could inspire courage. A story about pride leading to disaster could serve as a warning. A legend about a lost kingdom might remind listeners that even great achievements can disappear with time. In this sense, mythology became something larger than storytelling. It became a way of preserving wisdom, fears, hopes, and questions that might otherwise have been forgotten. The passage of time only made these stories more mysterious. Imagine hearing a legend that was already ancient when your great-grandparents were alive. The sheer age of the story would give it a certain weight. It would feel connected to something deeper than ordinary memory. Many Greeks lived among reminders of the past. Old temples stood on hillsides. Ancient roads crossed the countryside. Ruins from earlier civilizations could be found in unexpected places. These silent remnants encouraged people to think about those who came before them. Who had built these structures? What had their lives been like? What had happened to them? Sometimes there were no clear answers. The story stepped into that uncertainty and offered possibilities. Over time, those possibilities became traditions, and those traditions became part of the cultural memory of entire communities. The result was a world where history and imagination often blended together so thoroughly that separating them became almost impossible. One of the most fascinating ideas hidden within Greek mythology is the belief that important truths are often concealed rather than obvious. Again and again, characters fail to understand what is happening until much later. They misinterpret signs. They overlook clues. They assume they understand a situation, only to discover that reality is far more complicated than they imagined. This theme appears so frequently that it feels intentional. The stories seem to suggest that human beings rarely possess complete knowledge. People see only a small part of a much larger picture. They make decisions based on limited understanding and then live with the consequences. This idea remains remarkably relevant. Even in the modern world, people often discover that situations are more complex than they first appeared. New information emerges, perspectives change, assumptions prove incorrect. The myths capture this experience in dramatic form, turning ordinary uncertainty into memorable stories that continue to resonate across centuries. Another curious feature of Greek mythology is its relationship with nature. The natural world is rarely presented as a passive background. Mountains, rivers, forests, and seas often seem alive with significance. A river is not merely water flowing through a landscape. It becomes a boundary, a symbol, or a place where something important may occur. A mountain is not simply a geological formation. It becomes a location connected to mystery and possibility. This perspective reflects the way many ancient people experienced the world, without modern technology separating them from their surroundings. They lived much closer to nature's rhythms. Storms affected travel. Seasons influenced survival. The sea determined trade and communication. Nature was not something distant. It was a constant presence. As a result, it naturally became woven into mythology. Many stories seem to emerge directly from landscapes themselves, as though the mountains, forests, and coastlines inspired the legends through their very existence. The sea, in particular, remained one of the greatest sources of mystery. Even experienced sailors could never fully predict it. Calm waters could become dangerous with astonishing speed. Familiar routes could suddenly feel unfamiliar beneath changing weather conditions. Strange objects occasionally washed ashore. Unusual lights appeared in the distance. Every voyage carried uncertainty. For people living near the Mediterranean, the sea represented both opportunity and danger. It connected distant lands while simultaneously separating them. It offered wealth through trade while threatening destruction through storms. This dual nature made it a perfect setting for myths. The ocean became a symbol of the unknown itself, a place where ordinary expectations might fail and where unexpected discoveries could occur at any moment. Even now, despite centuries of exploration, the sea retains much of its mystery. Vast portions remain poorly understood. The ancient fascination with it feels surprisingly understandable. There is also a quieter mystery that runs through many myths, one that is easy to overlook. It is the mystery of how people change over time. Many legendary figures begin their stories as ordinary individuals. They possess doubts, weaknesses, and uncertainties. Yet their journeys transform them. The transformation is not always physical. More often, it is a change in understanding. Through challenges and experiences, they become different people than they were at the beginning. This pattern appears repeatedly because it reflects a universal aspect of life. No one remains exactly the same forever. Experiences leave marks. Knowledge accumulates. Perspectives shift. The myths take this gradual process and present it in symbolic form, turning personal growth into epic adventure. In doing so, they remind listeners that change is one of life's few constants. As the centuries passed, countless storytellers added their own voices to these traditions. Some emphasized adventure, others focused on wisdom. Some highlighted tragedy, while others preferred wonder. Each retelling subtly reshaped the myths. This constant evolution ensured their survival. A story that never changes may eventually be forgotten. A story capable of adapting to new audiences can endure almost indefinitely. Greek mythology survived because it remained flexible. Different generations found different meanings within the same tales. The stories continued speaking to new listeners because they addressed questions that never fully disappear. Questions about purpose, destiny, uncertainty, and the unknown future remain just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. Perhaps that is the most remarkable mystery of all. Out of all the stories told throughout history, why have these endured? Why do people still return to them after so much time has passed? The answer may lie in their ability to balance familiarity and mystery. They feel close enough to understand, yet distant enough to remain intriguing. They provide meaning without eliminating uncertainty. They offer possibilities without demanding certainty. Most importantly, they preserve a sense of wonder. In a world increasingly focused on explanations, the myths remind us that curiosity has value of its own. Not every mystery needs to be solved immediately. Some mysteries inspire exploration simply because they exist, as long as human beings continue asking questions about the world and their place within it. The old stories of Greece will continue finding new listeners. Their heroes will continue traveling into unknown lands. Their prophecies will continue provoking questions, and their mysteries will continue drifting through time, like echoes from a distant age, never completely fading, never fully revealing themselves, and always inviting us to look a little farther beyond the horizon. As the ancient stories moved through the centuries, there was one mystery that seemed to grow larger rather than smaller. It was the mystery of what had been forgotten. Most people naturally focus on the myths that survived, the stories that were copied, repeated, and preserved long enough to reach the modern world. Yet for every legend that survived, there were likely many others that disappeared. Entire generations lived and died, listening to stories that no longer exist. Children once knew the names of heroes that have been completely erased from history. Villages may have told local legends that vanished when the communities themselves disappeared. Temples may have been dedicated to traditions that nobody remembers today. This realization creates a fascinating possibility. The mythology we know may be only a small window into a much larger world of stories. Imagine standing in a vast library where most of the books have been lost. The remaining volumes would still be impressive, but they would also serve as reminders of everything that is missing. Greek mythology often feels exactly like that. The surviving tales hint at a larger landscape, hidden beyond reach, a landscape filled with mysteries that can never be fully recovered. This sense of loss becomes even more interesting when one considers how fragile memory can be. Entire civilizations have vanished throughout history, sometimes leaving behind only a handful of clues. A broken inscription, a ruined wall, a few scattered artifacts buried beneath the earth. When archaeologists uncover such traces, they often discover that reality is more complicated than anyone expected. The ancient Mediterranean was not a simple world divided into isolated cultures. It was a place where ideas constantly traveled. Traders crossed the sea. Travelers carried stories from one region to another. Beliefs mixed and changed. Legends absorbed new details. Over hundreds of years, myths evolved as they moved through different communities. A story told in one city might sound slightly different in another. A local tradition could merge with an older legend and create something entirely new. Because of this process, many myths resemble rivers. They begin somewhere in the distant past, but as they flow through time, they gather influences from everything they encounter. By the time they reach us, their original source may be impossible to identify. One particularly intriguing mystery concerns the way people interpreted unusual events. Modern explanations often rely on science, technology, and careful observation. Ancient people relied on the information available to them at the time. When something strange occurred, they searched for meaning. A comet appearing in the night sky might seem significant. An unexpected eclipse could inspire fear and wonder. A series of unusual weather events might be remembered for generations. These experiences often became attached to stories, and those stories gradually became part of mythology. What is fascinating is that the emotional response remains familiar even today. People are still captivated by rare events. They still gather to watch eclipses. They still look up when unusual lights appear in the sky. The difference is not the curiosity itself, but the framework used to understand what is being observed. The Greeks lived in a world where mystery occupied a much larger space, and mythology became one of the ways they explored that space. The night sky held a special place in this process. Long before modern astronomy revealed the immense scale of the universe, the stars inspired endless questions. Every clear evening offered the same remarkable sight. Thousands of lights stretched across the darkness, following patterns that seemed both orderly and mysterious. Some stars moved differently than others. Certain constellations appeared during specific seasons. Bright objects wandered across the heavens in ways that seemed difficult to explain. To the Greeks, the sky was not an empty space filled with distant objects. It was a living story. Every constellation carried meaning. Every pattern suggested a connection between the heavens and the world below. Looking upward was not simply an act of observation. It was an act of interpretation. People searched for significance among the stars, just as they searched for significance in dreams, prophecies, and unusual events. The desire to find meaning in the unknown is one of the oldest human instincts, and the myths preserve countless examples of it. There is also a deeper mystery hidden beneath many Greek legends, one that rarely receives as much attention as monsters or heroes. It is the mystery of why certain stories feel true, even when they are clearly fictional. A person may not believe that a god literally transformed into an animal, or that a hero fought a creature with impossible powers. Yet the story can still feel meaningful. It can still reveal something about ambition, fear, love, pride, or loss. This is one reason myths have survived so long. Their power does not depend entirely on whether they happened exactly as described. Instead, their power comes from their ability to express experiences that people continue to recognize. Human emotions have changed surprisingly little over thousands of years. Ancient listeners worried about many of the same things people worry about today. They feared failure. They hoped for success. They struggled with uncertainty. They wondered what the future might bring. The myths transformed those experiences into narratives large enough to capture the imagination, while remaining familiar enough to feel personal. Many of the stories also contain a quiet awareness of how temporary things can be. Great cities appear strong until they disappear. Powerful rulers seem invincible until they fall. Wealth accumulates and then vanishes. Even beauty fades with time. This theme appears repeatedly throughout Greek mythology and gives many legends a reflective quality. Beneath the adventures and mysteries lies a recognition that nothing lasts forever. Yet the stories are not entirely pessimistic. If anything, they suggest that temporary things can still possess immense value. A moment does not need to last forever to matter. A civilization does not need to survive indefinitely to leave an impact. A story does not need to be perfectly preserved to inspire future generations. In a way, mythology itself proves this idea. The original storytellers are gone. Their voices have long since faded. yet fragments of what they created continue to travel through time. Perhaps this is why ancient ruins often inspire such strong emotions. When people walk among the remains of temples, theaters, and forgotten cities, they are confronted with evidence of both achievement and impermanence. Someone built these structures. Someone lived here. Someone believed their world would continue. Yet centuries passed and circumstances changed. The stones remained while the people disappeared. Greek mythology frequently explores this tension between permanence and change. The stories preserve memories of places that no longer exist, people who can no longer speak, and beliefs that have evolved beyond recognition. At the same time, the stories themselves continue surviving. They become a bridge connecting distant generations. Through them, a small part of the ancient imagination remains alive. As the night grows deeper and the world of myth drifts further into shadow, it becomes clear that many of the greatest mysteries were never meant to be solved completely. The storytellers were not always searching for definitive answers. Often, they were exploring questions. They were trying to understand a world that felt vast, unpredictable, and full of wonder. Their myths became a way of thinking about uncertainty rather than escaping it. Thousands of years later, that quality remains one of their greatest strengths. The stories invite curiosity instead of certainty. They encourage reflection instead of simple conclusions. They remind us that some questions are valuable precisely because they remain unanswered. And so, the old mysteries continue, moving quietly through the centuries, carried by imagination, preserved by storytelling, and waiting patiently for anyone willing to pause for a moment and listen to the echoes of a world that still feels strangely alive despite the immense distance of time. If there is one feeling that appears again and again throughout Greek mythology, it is the feeling of standing at the edge of something unknown. The ancient Greeks lived in a world that often felt unfinished. Beyond the familiar cities and coastlines lay regions that few people had ever seen. Beyond the mountains were valleys known only through rumors. Beyond the sea were lands described by travelers whose stories grew more uncertain with every retelling. This constant presence of the unknown shaped the imagination of an entire civilization. It encouraged people to ask questions that could not be answered easily. It encouraged them to wonder what might exist just beyond the limits of their knowledge. In many ways, mythology became a map of those questions. Not a map showing where things were, but a map showing where mystery began. Whenever certainty ended, a story often appeared. Whenever people reached the edge of what they understood, mythology stepped forward and offered possibilities. Some of those possibilities were beautiful. Others were frightening. Most were a mixture of both. That balance is one reason the stories continue to feel so compelling. The unknown is rarely entirely good or entirely bad. It is simply unknown, and human beings have always been drawn toward it despite the risks. One of the quieter mysteries hidden within many myths is the idea that reality may be far more complicated than it first appears. Characters frequently discover that things are not what they seem. A stranger turns out to be someone important. A simple object possesses unexpected significance. An ordinary journey becomes life-changing. These moments occur so often that they begin to feel like a lesson woven into the mythology itself. The world contains layers that are not immediately visible. People often move through life assuming they understand what surrounds them, only to discover that their assumptions were incomplete. The Greeks transformed this experience into stories where hidden truths reveal themselves dramatically. but the underlying idea remains familiar. Even today, people occasionally encounter information that changes how they view a person, a place, or an event. A single discovery can completely alter understanding. The myths capture that feeling in a way that remains surprisingly effective despite the centuries separating us from their origins. This fascination with hidden layers may explain why caves appear so frequently in ancient stories. To modern visitors, a cave can still feel mysterious, but in the ancient world, the experience was even more powerful. Imagine approaching a dark opening in the side of a mountain with only a torch for light. The deeper one traveled, the more the outside world disappeared. Familiar sounds faded away. Shadows moved across rough stone walls. Passages twisted unexpectedly. Some caves extended far beyond what anyone could comfortably explore. Others contained underground rivers or chambers that seemed almost unreal. It is not difficult to understand why such places became associated with mystery. They felt like entrances to another world. Even people who never entered them could imagine what might exist inside. Over time, caves became natural settings for stories involving hidden knowledge, forgotten secrets, and encounters with forces beyond ordinary experience. In a sense, they symbolized the unknown itself. The deeper one traveled, the less certain everything became. The same feeling often appears in myths connected to dreams. Few experiences are stranger than dreaming. Every night, people enter worlds that seem real while they are happening and then vanish upon waking. Ancient Greeks were fascinated by this process. To them, dreams often appeared meaningful rather than random. Some believed dreams could reveal truths hidden from waking life. Others believed they offered warnings, guidance, or glimpses of events yet to occur. Whether those beliefs were accurate is less important than what they reveal about human nature. People have always searched for meaning in experiences they do not fully understand. Dreams occupy a unique place because they feel deeply personal while remaining difficult to explain. Even today, despite extensive research, dreaming retains an element of mystery. The ancient myths preserve that mystery, treating dreams as bridges between the known and the unknown, between certainty and possibility. As generations continued passing stories from one person to another fascinating pattern emerged. The greatest mysteries were often not external at all. They existed within people themselves. Many myths focus on choices, desires, fears, and motivations that characters struggle to understand. A hero may believe he knows what he wants, only to discover that his true motivations are far more complicated. A ruler may pursue power and later realize that power cannot provide what he expected. A traveler may search for answers in distant lands and ultimately discover something about himself instead. These themes appear repeatedly because they reflect one of the oldest mysteries humanity has ever faced: understanding the human mind. Ancient people did not possess modern psychology, yet they clearly recognized how complex human behavior could be. Their myths are filled with characters who act against their own interests, misunderstand themselves, or struggle with conflicting emotions. The stories often suggest that self-knowledge may be one of the most difficult forms of knowledge to obtain. This idea becomes even more interesting when considering how often myths involve journeys that lead inward as much as outward. On the surface, a character travels across seas, through forests, or into unfamiliar lands. Beneath the adventure, however, another journey is taking place. Experiences change the traveler, challenges reveal strengths and weaknesses, encounters force difficult decisions. By the end, the person who returns home is rarely the same individual who left. This pattern appears so frequently because it reflects something deeply true about life. Time changes people. Experience changes people. No one remains exactly as they were. The myths transform this gradual process into dramatic narratives, but the underlying reality remains recognizable. Every life is, in some sense, a journey into the unknown. Perhaps this is why the stories continue to feel alive after so many centuries. Their mysteries are not limited to ancient temples, forgotten islands, or legendary creatures. Those elements provide atmosphere and wonder, but beneath them lie questions that remain relevant in every age. What can truly be known about the future? How much control do people have over their own lives? Why do certain moments seem meaningful while others fade away? Why does the unknown inspire both fear and fascination? These questions existed long before Greek mythology and will likely continue existing long after the modern world has changed beyond recognition. The myths endure because they explore those questions without pretending to possess complete answers. Instead, they invite listeners to wonder. As the ancient world settles once more into darkness, one can almost imagine the countless storytellers who helped preserve these legends. Some sat beside fires beneath open skies. Others spoke in crowded marketplaces or quiet homes. Most likely, never imagined that their stories would survive for thousands of years. Yet somehow, they did. The names of many storytellers have vanished, but their questions remain. They continue drifting through the myths like distant echoes carried across water at night. They remind us that curiosity is one of humanity's oldest companions. Long before modern science, long before written history, people looked out into the darkness and wondered what might be waiting there. Greek mythology is, in many ways, the record of that wonder. It is a collection of questions asked by generations who refused to stop imagining what could exist beyond the edge of certainty, beyond the horizon, beyond the next mountain, or beyond the limits of human understanding itself. As the stories continued to spread across the ancient world, another mystery slowly emerged, one that is easy to overlook because it is hidden behind nearly every myth ever told. It is the mystery of why certain stories survive while others disappear. Throughout history, countless tales have been created. Most vanish within a generation or two. They are told for a time, remembered by a handful of people, and then gradually fade away. Yet some stories endure. They survive wars, disasters, migrations, and the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Greek mythology is filled with such stories. Somehow, they manage to travel through thousands of years without losing their ability to capture the imagination. The answer may lie in the fact that these myths are not really about distant gods or forgotten heroes. At their core, they are about experiences that remain familiar. They are about uncertainty. They are about hope. They are about fear, ambition, curiosity, and the desire to understand a world that often seems larger than human understanding. The names and settings belong to ancient Greece, but the emotions belong to everyone. A listener living 2,000 years ago could recognize them just as easily as someone listening today. That universality gave the myths a remarkable resilience. Even when details changed, the deeper questions remained. Many of those questions were inspired by the simple act of observing the world. Ancient people paid close attention to their surroundings because survival often depended on it. They noticed changes in weather, patterns among the stars, movements of animals, and shifts in the landscape. Yet observation did not always lead to explanation. Sometimes it only led to more questions. A strange rock formation might inspire a legend. An unusual cave could become associated with a forgotten story. A mountain hidden by clouds might seem to conceal secrets beyond ordinary experience. Over time, these locations accumulated myths the way old stones accumulate moss. Each generation added something new. A rumor became a story became a tradition became part of mythology. What makes this process fascinating is that it reveals how closely human imagination is connected to the physical world. People rarely create stories from nothing. More often, they begin with something real and then build upon it. A landscape inspires wonder. Wonder inspires questions. Questions inspire stories. The result is mythology, a bridge connecting imagination to reality. Perhaps nowhere is this connection more apparent than in the way myths treat distant places. The farther away a location was, the easier it became to imagine extraordinary things about it. Most people in ancient Greece would never travel very far from home. Their understanding of remote regions often came from second-hand accounts, rumors, and stories brought back by travelers. This created enormous opportunities for mystery. A sailor might describe an unfamiliar coastline. Someone else might repeat the description with a few embellishments. Another person might add details that seemed plausible but were never verified. Within a few generations, an ordinary location could become a place of legend. What is remarkable is that this tendency has never completely disappeared. Even in modern times, people remain fascinated by remote places. They wonder about hidden civilizations, unexplored regions, and secrets waiting to be discovered. The difference is that modern maps have reduced many physical mysteries. The Greeks lived at a time when much larger portions of the world remained unknown, allowing imagination to flourish on a grand scale. The same pattern can be found in myths involving the passage of time. Many stories carry a strange sense that the past was somehow different from the present. Ancient heroes seem larger than life. Earlier generations appear stronger, wiser, or closer to the divine. Lost ages are described with a sense of wonder and longing. This idea appears so frequently that it feels almost universal. Human beings often imagine that something important existed before their own time. Whether that belief is accurate matters less than the fact that it continues appearing across cultures and centuries. Perhaps it reflects nostalgia. Perhaps it reflects the awareness that every generation inherits only fragments of what came before. Whatever the reason, Greek mythology is filled with echoes of vanished worlds. The stories seem to look backward toward horizons that cannot be reached, toward ages remembered only through legend. This gives them a unique emotional quality. They are not merely tales about adventure. They are also tales about memory. Memory itself remains one of the greatest mysteries woven throughout mythology. Even today, scientists continue studying how memories form, change, and sometimes disappear. Ancient people had no scientific understanding of these processes, yet they clearly recognized that memory was both powerful and fragile. A person could remember an event incorrectly. A story could change over time. Entire generations could forget things that once seemed important. Greek mythology often feels like an attempt to resist that forgetting. By transforming experiences into stories, people increased the chances that those experiences would survive. Details might change, but the core of the story remained. Through myths, memories gained a form of permanence. They could travel farther than any individual life. They could outlast those who first created them. In many ways, mythology became a vessel carrying fragments of the past into the future. There is also something deeply human about the way myths approach uncertainty. Modern culture often values certainty and clear answers. Greek mythology frequently moves in the opposite direction. Instead of eliminating uncertainty, it explores it. Characters are forced to make decisions without knowing what will happen. Travelers venture into places they do not understand. Prophecies offer clues without complete explanations. The future remains hidden. This approach mirrors reality more closely than many people realize. Human beings spend most of their lives navigating uncertainty. No one knows exactly what tomorrow will bring. No one can predict every consequence of their actions. The myths acknowledge this reality and transform it into narrative. Rather than pretending uncertainty can be eliminated, they suggest it is simply part of existence. This perspective may be one reason the stories continue to resonate. They feel honest about the limits of knowledge. As the night deepens and the ancient world grows quiet once again, it becomes easier to see why these myths endured for so long. They offered more than entertainment. They offered companionship in the face of mystery. They reminded listeners that uncertainty was not something to fear completely. It could also inspire curiosity. The unknown could be frightening, but it could also be beautiful. Beyond every horizon lay another possibility. Beyond every question lay another question. The storytellers of ancient Greece understood this deeply. They knew that people are drawn toward mysteries, not because they expect easy answers, but because the search itself is meaningful. And so the stories continued, carried across generations like lanterns moving through darkness, illuminating small pieces of an enormous and mysterious world, while leaving enough shadows behind to ensure that wonder would never disappear entirely. Among the strangest mysteries in Greek mythology are the stories that seem to appear suddenly, without any clear explanation of where they came from. Some legends describe creatures so unusual that even ancient writers struggle to explain them. The most famous monsters, such as the Minotaur or Medusa, are well known today, but beyond them existed dozens of lesser-known beings whose origins remain unclear. Some were described as living in remote mountains, others in caves near the sea, and some in places that cannot be identified at all. What makes these stories fascinating is that many of them may have begun with real observations. Ancient people occasionally discovered enormous bones buried in the earth. Without knowledge of dinosaurs or extinct mammals, such discoveries could seem impossible to explain. A massive skull or strange skeleton might easily inspire stories about giants, monsters, or forgotten creatures. Historians have suggested that some myths may have originated in exactly this way. A mysterious discovery is made, explanations are invented, and eventually those explanations become part of mythology. Whether this happened in every case is impossible to know, but it shows how closely myth and mystery were connected. Another enduring mystery involves the legendary race known as the Hyperboreans. According to ancient stories, they lived far to the north, beyond the reach of ordinary travelers. Their land was said to be peaceful, prosperous, and strangely untouched by many of the hardships experienced elsewhere. What makes the Hyperboreans interesting is that nobody could clearly identify where they lived. Different writers placed them in different locations, Some treated them as real people, others treated them almost like mythical beings. The mystery deepened because travelers occasionally claimed to possess knowledge about distant northern lands. Yet their descriptions rarely matched one another. Over time, the Hyperboreans became one of mythology's greatest enigmas. Were they based on real people living beyond the Greek world? Were they entirely fictional? Or were they a mixture of truth and imagination? No one knows for certain. Their story survives precisely because it was never resolved. Lost knowledge appears repeatedly throughout Greek mythology. Certain stories suggest that ancient wisdom once existed but disappeared over time. There are references to forgotten techniques, vanished civilizations, and secrets known only to a few individuals. Some myths even imply that earlier generations possessed greater understanding than those who came after them. This idea fascinated ancient listeners because it introduced a troubling possibility. What if important knowledge could simply vanish? History has shown that this can happen. Libraries burn, kingdoms collapse, languages disappear. Entire traditions can be lost within a few generations. The Greeks understood this danger better than many people realize. Their myths often contain warnings about how fragile knowledge can be. In some stories, wisdom survives only because a single person remembers it. In others, knowledge disappears forever. These themes feel surprisingly modern because they reflect a reality that remains true today. Secret cults and mystery religions created another layer of uncertainty. Unlike public ceremonies that everyone could witness, certain groups restricted their teachings to initiates. Members swore oaths of secrecy. Outsiders were not told exactly what occurred during rituals. Because of this secrecy, rumors spread easily. People speculated about hidden ceremonies, sacred knowledge, and mysterious experiences that couldn't be discussed openly. Historians still debate many details because so little information survived. Some participants described the experience as life-changing. Others hinted that they learned profound truths about existence, death, and the nature of reality. Yet because secrecy was considered essential, much of what happened remains unknown. Thousands of years later, these mystery traditions continue to be among the least understood aspects of Greek religious life. The underworld itself may be the greatest mystery in all of Greek mythology. Nearly every culture develops stories about what happens after death, and the Greeks were no exception. Yet unlike many later traditions that offer detailed descriptions, Greek mythology often leaves important questions unanswered. The underworld appears as a vast and shadowy realm, where souls continue existing in a form that is neither fully alive nor entirely gone. Heroes occasionally visit and return, but their accounts are incomplete. Different stories describe different regions. Certain details contradict one another. Rather than presenting a clear picture, the myths create an atmosphere of uncertainty. This uncertainty may explain why the stories remained so compelling. Death was the greatest unknown facing every person, and mythology reflected that reality. Instead of eliminating the mystery, it preserved it. Then there is the mystery of Atlantis, perhaps the most famous lost civilization in history. The story describes a powerful island kingdom that supposedly disappeared beneath the sea. What makes Atlantis remarkable is not the story itself, but the reaction it continues to inspire. For centuries, explorers, historians, and dreamers have searched for evidence of its existence. Proposed locations have included islands in the Mediterranean, regions of the Atlantic Ocean, and even places far beyond the ancient world known to the Greeks. Despite countless theories, no definitive answer has emerged. Some scholars believe Atlantis was always intended as a symbolic story. Others argue that it may contain memories of real disasters or lost civilizations. The debate continues because the mystery remains unsolved. Every generation revisits the question and imagines that perhaps the answer is still waiting to be discovered. Perhaps the strangest mystery of all is how these stories survived. Empires vanished, cities were destroyed, wars reshaped entire regions. Yet somehow, the myths endured. They passed from storyteller to storyteller, from scroll to scroll, from generation to generation. Many details were lost, but the central mysteries remained. People continued wondering about Atlantis. They continued debating the Hyperboreans. They continued asking whether forgotten knowledge once existed. They continued imagining hidden places beyond the edge of the known world. The myths survived because the questions survived. And even now, thousands of years later, those same mysteries remain alive. No definitive answers have appeared. No final explanation has solved every puzzle. The ancient world continues guarding many of its secrets, and perhaps that is exactly why Greek mythology remains so fascinating. The stories do not simply offer legends, they offer mysteries that have endured for millennia, inviting each new generation to search for answers that may never be fully found. If there is one mystery that sits at the very heart of the Greek mythology, it is the question of what existed before the gods themselves. Most people know the stories of Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, but according to the oldest myths, even they were not the first powers to exist. Before Olympus, before humanity, before the earth had its familiar shape, there was chaos. Modern readers often imagine chaos as disorder, but in the oldest Greek stories, it was something stranger. It was an emptiness, a void, a state of existence that cannot easily be described. Out of chaos came the first primordial beings, ancient entities that represented the foundations of reality itself. Gaia became the earth, Nyx became night, Erebus became darkness, Tartarus became the abyss beneath the world. What makes these figures fascinating is that they feel less like characters and more like forces. They belong to a period of mythology that almost resembles a dream. The stories provide very few details about what that age looked like. It existed so far in the past that even the gods seemed distant from it. The result is one of mythology's deepest mysteries. What exactly was the world before creation was complete? And what did the Greeks truly imagine when they spoke of chaos? Among those primordial beings, few are more mysterious than Nyx, the goddess of night. Ancient writers treated her with unusual respect, even fear, while Zeus ruled Olympus and commanded thunder itself. Several myths suggest that even Zeus was cautious around Nyx. This is extraordinary because Zeus was rarely portrayed as afraid of anything. Yet Night was older than the Olympians. She belonged to a deeper layer of existence. From her came many strange powers associated with sleep, death, dreams, fate, and darkness. Some myths imply that Night understood secrets hidden even from the gods. Unfortunately, very few stories focus directly on her, leaving enormous gaps in our understanding. This absence creates a mystery of its own. Why did such an important figure receive so little attention? Was there once a larger tradition surrounding her that was eventually lost? Another mystery centers around the Fates, three beings said to control the destiny of every living creature. Unlike many gods, the Fates were not simply powerful. They appeared absolute. One spun the thread of life, another measured it, and the third cut it. Even Zeus himself was often described as respecting the limits they imposed. This creates one of the oldest philosophical questions in mythology. If fate controls everything, do individuals truly possess freedom? Greek myths never provide a clear answer. Again and again, characters struggle against prophecies, only to help fulfill them. Attempts to escape destiny frequently become the very reason destiny occurs. The story of Olympus is the most famous example. A prophecy warned that he would kill his father and marry his mother. In trying to avoid this future, everyone involved unknowingly moved closer to it. The tale remains disturbing because it touches upon a question people still ask today. How much control do we really have over our lives? The Oracle of Delphi represents another extraordinary mystery. For centuries, people traveled across Greece seeking answers from the famous priestess who spoke on behalf of Apollo. Kings, generals, merchants, and ordinary citizens all made the journey. Yet the answers they received were rarely straightforward. Instead, they came in riddles, symbols, and cryptic statements. Historians continue debating how these prophecies worked. Some theories suggest natural gases beneath the temple may have affected the priestess. Others believe the phenomenon was entirely religious. Whatever the explanation, Delphi became one of the most influential locations in the ancient world. Entire wars and political decisions were shaped by its predictions. What makes it fascinating is that many prophecies seem accurate only after events occur. This ambiguity ensured that the mystery never disappeared. Then there are the Titans, the rulers who came before the Olympian gods. Most people know that Zeus eventually defeated them, but mythology provides surprisingly few details about what the world looked like under Titan rule. Cronus, their leader, is one of the strangest figures in mythology. He ruled during what some stories call a golden age, a time when suffering was supposedly rare and humanity lived in peace. Yet Cronus is also remembered for swallowing his own children out of fear that they would overthrow him. This contradiction creates an intriguing mystery. Was the age of the Titans truly golden, or was it merely remembered that way by later generations? The myths never fully resolve the question. Perhaps no location in Greek mythology is more mysterious than Tartarus. Many people think of it as simply a prison for defeated titans, but ancient descriptions suggest something far stranger. Tartarus existed beneath the underworld itself, an abyss so deep that a falling object would supposedly take years to reach its bottom. It was a place associated with cosmic punishment and ancient horrors. Some myths imply that terrible beings remained imprisoned there long after the Titan War ended. Others hint that Tartarus existed before the gods and would continue existing after them. Unlike Olympus, which is described in vivid detail, Tartarus remains intentionally vague. The darkness surrounding it seems almost deliberate, as though the storytellers wanted listeners to imagine something too vast and terrible to describe completely. The Gigantomachy, the war between the gods and the giants, is another source of mystery. According to legend, the giants were born from the blood of Uranus when it fell upon the earth. They later challenged the Olympian gods in a catastrophic conflict. What makes the giants unusual is that they seem to represent something deeper than ordinary monsters. Many scholars believe they symbolize older forces of nature, resisting the arrival of cosmic order. In other words, the battle may not simply be about physical combat. It may represent the struggle between chaos and structure, wilderness and civilization, the old world and the new. The myths never state this directly, but the symbolism remains powerful. Then there is the mysterious figure of Prometheus, perhaps one of the most fascinating beings in all of mythology. He stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, an act that changed the world forever. Yet fire in mythology often represents more than literal flames. It symbolizes knowledge, technology, creativity, and civilization itself. Prometheus effectively gave humanity the ability to shape its own future. For this crime, he suffered an endless punishment. The story raises difficult questions. Why would the gods want to keep such power from humans? Why was knowledge considered dangerous? Is wisdom a gift or a burden? Greek mythology never provides simple answers. Instead, it presents Prometheus as a tragic figure caught between divine authority and human progress. Even the famous gods themselves contain mysteries that are rarely discussed. Apollo is remembered as a god of light, music, and prophecy. Yet, he also carries darker associations involving plague and sudden death. Dionysus appears as a joyful god of celebration, but is equally connected to madness, chaos, and the loss of identity. Hermes serves as a messenger, yet frequently crosses boundaries between worlds, guiding souls into the underworld. These contradictions are not accidental. They reflect an ancient understanding that reality itself contains opposing forces. Nothing is entirely simple. Every power contains multiple sides. Every blessing may carry a hidden cost. At the deepest level, Greek mythology is not really about gods or monsters. It is about mystery itself. Why does the world exist? What lies beyond death? Is destiny real? Can knowledge be dangerous? Were there civilizations before our own? Do forgotten truths still lie hidden somewhere in the darkness of the past? These questions echo throughout every layer of the mythology. They appear in stories about titans, in prophecies spoken by oracles, in legends of lost kingdoms, and in tales of heroes who journeyed beyond the boundaries of the known world. Thousands of years have passed since those stories were first told, yet many of the questions remain unanswered. Perhaps that is why Greek mythology continues to endure. At its core, it is not a collection of solutions. It is a collection of mysteries, and some of those mysteries are as powerful today as they were when listeners first heard them beneath the stars of the ancient world. Among all the mysterious figures in Greek mythology, few are as fascinating as Hecate. Unlike Zeus, Poseidon, or Athena, she was never one of the most publicly celebrated gods. Yet her presence appears in some of the darkest and most mysterious corners of ancient belief. Hecate was associated with crossroads, magic, spirits, the night, and hidden knowledge. Ancient people often left offerings for her at places where roads met, because crossroads were considered locations of uncertainty. When a traveler arrived at a crossroads, a choice had to be made. One path led in one direction, another led somewhere else entirely. In mythology, such places became symbols for decisions, destiny, and the unknown future. Hecate stood at the center of these mysteries. She was often described as carrying torches through darkness, suggesting that she possessed knowledge unavailable to ordinary people. Yet even she did not remove mystery completely. Instead, she guided people through it. This distinction is important because many Greek myths suggest that wisdom is not about eliminating uncertainty. Wisdom is about learning how to move through uncertainty without being overwhelmed by it. The world of dreams provided another source of endless fascination. Ancient Greeks did not fully understand why dreams occurred, which made them seem almost supernatural. Some dreams felt meaningless, while others seemed unusually vivid and memorable. A person might wake with the strange feeling that a dream carried significance. Entire myths were built around this experience. One of the most intriguing figures connected to dreams was Morpheus, a being associated with shaping dream images. According to later traditions, he could appear in dreams wearing the face of anyone. Imagine how mysterious this idea must have seemed in the ancient world. Every night, people entered landscapes that felt real while they were happening. They spoke with people who were far away. They visited places they had never seen. They witnessed impossible events. Upon waking, those worlds vanished almost immediately. Dreams became one of the great mysteries of existence because they blurred the boundary between reality and imagination. Even now, despite scientific advances, dreams remain partly mysterious. The Greeks may not have understood the mechanisms behind them, but they clearly understood their emotional power. Perhaps no myth explores the mystery of death more deeply than the story of Orpheus. According to legend, Orpheus possessed such extraordinary musical ability that his songs could influence animals, trees, rivers, and even the powers of the underworld. After losing the woman he loved, Eurydice, he attempted something no ordinary person would dare. He journeyed into the realm of the dead itself. This story is remarkable because it focuses less on monsters and adventure and more on grief, hope, and the unknown. The underworld represented the greatest mystery imaginable. Everyone knew death would eventually come, yet nobody truly understood what awaited beyond it. Orpheus became a symbol of humanity's desire to cross that boundary and return with answers. His journey almost succeeds. He is given a chance to bring Eurydice back to the living world under one condition. He must not look back at her until they reach the surface. At the last moment, doubt overwhelms him. He turns, and she disappears forever. The story has endured for thousands of years because it captures a universal human experience. Sometimes uncertainty is harder to endure than certainty. Sometimes people would rather know the truth, even if it hurts, than continue living with unanswered questions. Another mystery surrounds Dionysus, one of the strangest gods in Greek mythology. On the surface, he appears to be a god of celebration, festivals, and wine. Yet beneath that image lies something far more complex. Ancient writers often associated Dionysus with transformation, altered states of mind, and the breakdown of ordinary reality. His followers participated in rituals that outsiders often struggle to understand. Some accounts describe ecstatic celebrations deep in forests or mountains. Others suggest experiences that participants consider deeply spiritual. Historians still debate exactly what occurred during many of these ceremonies because reliable descriptions are scarce. What is clear is that Dionysus represented forces that could not easily be controlled. He reminded people that beneath civilization existed powerful instincts and emotions. This made him both fascinating and unsettling. Unlike gods associated with order and structure, Dionysus was connected to unpredictability. He embodied the idea that human beings do not always fully understand themselves. The mystery of hidden identities appears repeatedly throughout Greek mythology as well. Gods frequently disguised themselves when interacting with mortals. A stranger encountered on a road might secretly be a divine being. An old traveler asking for shelter could possess extraordinary power. This recurring theme carried an important lesson. Appearances can be misleading. The world often contains more than people realize. Ancient listeners would have understood this immediately because it reflected everyday experience. People regularly discover that others are different from what they first assumed. A seemingly ordinary person may possess remarkable wisdom. A respected figure may conceal dangerous flaws. The myths transformed these observations into stories involving divine disguises. But the underlying idea remains familiar. Reality often reveals itself slowly. One of the deepest mysteries hidden within Greek mythology concerns knowledge itself. Again and again, characters seek information they believe will solve their problems. They search for prophecies, secret wisdom, magical objects, or answers from the gods. Yet obtaining knowledge rarely produces the outcome they expect. Sometimes the truth creates new difficulties. Sometimes understanding comes with a cost. The story of Prometheus demonstrated this through fire. The story of Oedipus demonstrated it through prophecy. Many other myths repeat the same lesson in different forms. Knowledge is powerful, but power is rarely simple. The Greeks seemed deeply aware that answers can create new questions. Every mystery solved may reveal another mystery beyond it. Perhaps this is why so many ancient myths remain compelling today. They are not built around certainty, they are built around curiosity. Their heroes explore unknown lands, their travelers seek hidden truths, their philosophers ask impossible questions. Their gods themselves often struggle with forces older and stranger than they are. Beneath every story lies the same fundamental realization: the universe is larger than human understanding. The Greeks did not attempt to eliminate that mystery completely. Instead, they embraced it. They turned it into stories, symbols, and legends that could be passed from one generation to another. In doing so, they created something remarkable. They preserved not only their beliefs, but also their wonder. Thousands of years later, that wonder still survives. It lingers in stories about lost kingdoms, forgotten gods, strange prophecies, and journeys into impossible realms. It survives because mystery itself survives. No matter how much knowledge humanity gains, there will always be questions waiting beyond the horizon, just as there were for the storytellers who first imagined the ancient world of Greek mythology beneath the stars. Among the oldest and most unsettling mysteries in Greek mythology is the story of the river Styx. To modern readers, it may seem like simply another river connected to the underworld, but ancient Greeks viewed it as something far more important. The Styx was not merely a location, it was a boundary, a division between worlds, a place where the rules of existence seemed different. According to mythology, the souls of the dead had to cross its dark waters before entering the realm beyond life. Yet what made the Styx truly extraordinary was the fact that even the gods respected it. While gods frequently argued, deceived one another, and interfered in human affairs, there was one thing they took extremely seriously: an oath sworn upon the waters of the Styx. Such an oath was considered unbreakable. If a god violated it, severe punishment would follow. This detail raises an intriguing question. Why would immortal beings fear a river? The myths never provide a complete explanation. They simply present the Styx as something ancient, powerful, and binding. Some scholars believe the river represented a force older than the Olympian gods themselves, a reminder that certain laws of existence existed beyond even divine authority. Whether this interpretation is correct remains uncertain, But the mystery has fascinated people for centuries. Connected to the Styx is another mysterious figure, Charon, the silent ferryman of the dead. Unlike many mythological characters, Charon speaks very little. He simply performs his task, transporting souls across the dark waters. Yet his presence appears again and again in ancient stories. What makes him so fascinating is the sense of inevitability surrounding him. Heroes may battle monsters, kings may command armies, great thinkers may achieve wisdom. But eventually, everyone reaches the river. Everyone encounters the ferryman. Charon represents a truth that no one can escape. In many ways, his silence makes him even more mysterious. The myths tell us almost nothing about his thoughts, desires, or origins. He exists almost like a force of nature, carrying out an ancient duty that began long before recorded history. Some legends suggest that only a few living individuals ever crossed his river and returned. Those rare journeys only deepened the mystery of what truly existed beyond the dark waters. Deeper still lay Tartarus, perhaps the most terrifying location in all of Greek mythology. Many people think of Tartarus as simply a prison, but ancient descriptions suggest something far stranger. It was said to exist beneath the underworld itself, so deep that the distance between Earth and Tartarus was equal to the distance between Earth and the heavens. This image alone reveals how the Greeks imagined it, not as an ordinary place, but as a cosmic abyss. The defeated Titans were imprisoned there after their war against Zeus. Monstrous beings were confined there. Ancient powers, too dangerous to remain free, were locked away in its depths. Yet the myths rarely describe Tartarus in detail. Instead, they rely on suggestion, darkness, distance, silence, endless depth. These elements create an atmosphere far more unsettling than any detailed description could achieve. The less listeners knew about Tartarus, the more frightening it became. In many ways, it symbolizes humanity's fear of what exists beyond knowledge itself. Another mystery concerns the age before humanity. Greek mythology describes several different ages of mankind, each less perfect than the one before it. The most famous is the Golden Age, a period when people supposedly lived without suffering, conflict, or hardship. Food was abundant, life was peaceful, the world existed in harmony. Yet the Golden Age ended, giving way to later ages marked by increasing difficulty and decline. What is interesting is that many cultures around the world tell similar stories. Again and again, civilizations describe a lost age of perfection that existed long ago. Historians have never found evidence for such an era, yet the idea appears repeatedly throughout human history. Why? Some believe it reflects nostalgia. Others suggest it may represent humanity's tendency to imagine the past as better than the present. Whatever the explanation, the mystery remains. Why are people so drawn to stories about lost golden ages? Greek mythology never answers this question directly, but it preserves one of the earliest and most influential versions of the idea. One of the strangest mysteries involves the disappearance of the heroes themselves. During the great age of mythology, heroes seemed to exist everywhere. Perseus defeated Medusa. Theseus battled the Minotaur. Jason searched for the Golden Fleece. Heracles completed impossible labors. Yet, after a certain point, these legendary figures seem to vanish. The age of heroes comes to an end. Ordinary history begins. The world becomes less magical. Monsters become rarer. Direct encounters with gods become less common. Why? The myths provide different explanations, but many suggest that the heroic age was never meant to last forever. It was a unique period, separating the world of gods from the world of ordinary humans. Once its purpose ended, the heroes disappeared into legend. This transition is one of the most fascinating aspects of Greek mythology because it mirrors the way people often think about the past. There is a feeling that something extraordinary once existed and gradually faded away. Whether that feeling reflects reality or imagination is impossible to know. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all concerns the forgotten stories that never survived. Today we know hundreds of Greek myths, but ancient writers frequently reference tales that no longer exist. Entire poems vanished. Entire collections of legends disappeared. Sometimes only a single sentence remains, mentioning a hero whose adventures are completely lost. Imagine hearing the name of a legendary figure and realizing that every story about them has vanished from history. This happened countless times. What survived may represent only a fraction of what once existed. Somewhere in the distant past, storytellers shared myths that no modern person will ever hear again. Their characters, mysteries, and adventures disappeared long ago, yet traces remain, like fragments of a larger puzzle whose missing pieces can never be recovered. This realization gives Greek mythology one final layer of mystery. The stories we know are not the complete mythology. They are the surviving mythology. Behind them lies an enormous shadow made up of forgotten legends, lost books, vanished temples, and memories that faded before they could be preserved. We can see hints of that hidden world, but never the whole picture. And perhaps that is fitting. Greek mythology has always been about the unknown. It has always been about horizons that cannot quite be reached and questions that cannot quite be answered. Even the mythology itself remains partially mysterious, preserving secrets that time has chosen not to reveal. Thousands of years later, those secrets continue to linger in the darkness behind the stories, reminding us that some mysteries are powerful precisely because they remain unsolved. One of the most overlooked mysteries in Greek mythology is the question of what happened to the gods when people stopped believing in them. For thousands of years, temples stood across the Greek world. Sacrifices were offered, festivals were celebrated, prayers were spoken. The gods were treated as real forces that influenced everyday life. Yet history changed. New religions appeared. Empires rose and fell. Ancient temples were abandoned. Statues were broken or buried. Slowly, the world that had once belonged to Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and the other Olympians faded away. This creates a fascinating mystery that mythology itself never had the chance to answer. What becomes of a god when their worshippers disappear? Ancient storytellers rarely considered such a possibility because they lived in a world where the gods seemed permanent. Yet from a modern perspective, the question feels strangely powerful. The myths survive, but the civilization that created them is gone. The gods remain famous, but their temples stand silent. In a way, Greek mythology has become a collection of echoes from a world that no longer exists. And that transformation may be one of its greatest mysteries. Another fascinating subject involves the ancient monsters that existed before many of the famous heroes were born. Most people remember the creatures that were defeated, but mythology often hints at far older horrors lurking in the distant past. Typhon is perhaps the greatest example. According to legend, Typhon was so enormous and terrifying that even the gods feared him. Some descriptions portray him as a giant whose head touched the stars. Others describe hundreds of serpent heads emerging from his body. Ancient writers could not even agree on what he looked like, because they were attempting to describe something that symbolized chaos itself. When Typhon attacked Olympus, many gods reportedly fled. This detail is remarkable because the Olympians are normally portrayed as confident and powerful. Yet Typhon represented something different. He represented the possibility that order could collapse and that the world might return to the chaos from which it emerged. His defeat by Zeus became one of the defining moments in mythology because it symbolized stability, overcoming destruction. Yet, the mystery remains. Why did so many cultures create stories about ancient monsters existing before the current order of the world? Perhaps such stories reflect a deep human fear that beneath civilization, beneath order, beneath everything familiar, chaos still waits. Closely connected to this idea are the ancient sea monsters that haunted the imagination of sailors. The Mediterranean was the center of Greek civilization, but it was also one of its greatest sources of uncertainty. Every voyage involved risk. Storms appeared suddenly, ships vanished, entire crews disappeared without explanation. It is easy to understand why legends of sea monsters became popular. Scylla and Charybdis are among the most famous examples. One was described as a monstrous creature hiding among coastal rocks, while the other appeared as a gigantic whirlpool capable of swallowing entire ships. Sailors navigating dangerous waters may have encountered powerful currents, hidden reefs, and violent storms. Over generations, those dangers became personified as monsters. Yet even today, there is something unsettling about the ocean. Vast areas remain unexplored. Strange creatures continue to be discovered. The Greeks may not have understood the sea scientifically, but they clearly understood its ability to inspire awe and fear. Perhaps even stranger are the myths surrounding sleep itself. The Greeks recognized that sleep was one of the most mysterious experiences in human life. Every night, consciousness disappeared into darkness. Hours passed without awareness. Then somehow, people returned. Ancient mythology personified this mystery through Hypnos, the god of sleep. According to legend, Hypnos lived in a hidden cave where sunlight never entered. Around the cave grew strange plants associated with drowsiness and dreams. Rivers flowed quietly nearby, and silence filled the air. It is one of the most atmospheric locations in all mythology. What makes it fascinating is that sleep remains mysterious even now. Scientists understand far more than ancient people did. Yet, important questions remain. Why do dreams occur? Why does consciousness fade and return? Why do some dreams feel so vivid while others vanish instantly? The Greeks transformed these questions into mythology, creating a world where sleep itself became a powerful and ancient force. The relationship between sleep and death adds another layer to the mystery. In mythology, Hypnos and Thanatos, the personification of death, were often described as brothers. This connection reveals how ancient people viewed both experiences. Sleep resembles death in certain ways. The world disappears, awareness fades, time seems to vanish. Then, in the case of sleep, consciousness returns. The comparison is both beautiful and unsettling. It suggests that ancient storytellers saw sleep as a temporary journey into the unknown. Every night, people entered a state they could not fully control or understand. Every morning, they returned. It is one of the oldest mysteries humanity has ever experienced, and mythology preserved that mystery through symbolism and story. There is also the fascinating mystery of the forgotten gods. Most modern discussions focus on the major Olympians, But ancient Greece contained countless local deities, spirits, and divine figures whose names have almost completely vanished. Some were worshipped only in specific towns. Others were associated with individual springs, forests, rivers, or mountains. In many cases, historians know almost nothing about them. A name survives on a damaged inscription. A brief mention appears in an ancient text. Beyond that, silence. Imagine being a deity worshipped for centuries and then slowly forgotten until only a few letters remain carved into stone. This happened repeatedly throughout history. Entire traditions disappeared. Entire mythologies faded. What survives today may represent only a fraction of what once existed. The forgotten gods remind us how much has been lost. Another enduring mystery involves the strange relationship between mythology and reality. Occasionally, archaeology uncovers discoveries that seem oddly connected to ancient stories. A lost city is found where a legend claimed it once existed. Evidence appears suggesting that an old disaster may have inspired a famous myth. A forgotten civilization emerges from beneath the earth after centuries of obscurity. These discoveries do not prove that mythology is literally true, but they reveal something important. Myths often contain fragments of memory. Beneath layers of imagination, exaggeration, and symbolism, there may be traces of real events. This possibility fascinates historians because it means the boundary between history and mythology is not always clear. Sometimes, myths preserve memories that would otherwise have vanished entirely. As the ancient world drifts further into darkness and the stories continue their journey through time, one realization becomes impossible to ignore. The greatest mystery in Greek mythology may not be Atlantis, the underworld, the Titans, or even the gods themselves. It may be the human imagination. How did people create stories so powerful that they survived for thousands of years? How did legends told around fires and in temples continue traveling long after the civilizations that created them disappeared? The answer remains elusive. Yet perhaps that is fitting. Greek mythology began with mystery, and even after centuries of study, it remains surrounded by mystery. The stories continue asking questions that have no final answers. They continue pointing toward horizons that cannot quite be reached. And somewhere beyond those horizons, hidden among the shadows of lost ages and forgotten worlds, the oldest mysteries still wait, as silent and fascinating as they were when the first storytellers looked up at the night sky and began to wonder. Among all the mysterious beings that appear in Greek mythology, none may be more enigmatic than Nyx, the goddess of night. Unlike Zeus, Poseidon, or Athena, Nyx was not one of the rulers of Olympus. She belonged to something older, something far more ancient. According to the oldest myths, she emerged near the beginning of existence itself, long before the Olympian gods came to power. In some traditions, she was born directly from chaos, the primordial void that existed before the world took shape. This alone makes her unusual. Most gods belong to a recognizable family tree, but Nyx stands closer to the origins of reality itself. She existed before mountains, before cities, before humanity, and perhaps even before many of the laws that governed the universe. Ancient writers often treated her with a level of respect rarely given to other deities. Even Zeus, ruler of the gods, was said to be cautious around her. That detail has fascinated scholars for centuries. Why would the most powerful god fear night? Part of the answer may lie in what Nyx represented. She was not simply darkness, she was the arrival of uncertainty, During the day, people could see their surroundings. They could travel, work, and understand the world around them. Night changed everything. Familiar landscapes became unfamiliar. Distances became difficult to judge. Sounds seemed louder. Shadows moved in unexpected ways. Ancient people experienced darkness very differently than modern societies illuminated by electric light. Once the sun disappeared, the world became mysterious. Entire regions vanished into blackness. The unknown seemed to move closer. Night naturally became associated with dreams, secrets, fears, and hidden knowledge. Nyx embodied all of these things. She was the ruler of a realm where certainty faded and mystery flourished. Some myths describe Nyx as living in a distant and shadowy palace at the edge of the world. There, night and day passed one another, without ever truly meeting. As one entered the world, the other departed. This image is surprisingly beautiful. It suggests a cosmic rhythm older than civilization itself. Every evening, night emerges. Every morning, she retreats. Yet she never disappears completely. She waits beyond the horizon, ready to return. Ancient storytellers seemed fascinated by this endless cycle. Unlike many gods who ruled specific locations, Nyx touched every corner of existence. No kingdom was beyond her reach. No mountain stood too high. No sea stretched too far. Every living thing eventually entered her domain. What makes Nyx even more mysterious is the family associated with her. According to mythology, she gave birth to a remarkable collection of beings connected to some of existence's deepest mysteries. Among her children were sleep, death, dreams, doom, and fate. This is a striking detail. It places many of the most powerful forces in the universe under the influence of night. Sleep visits every person. Death comes to every life. Dreams arrive without invitation. Fate shapes events in ways that are often difficult to understand. By linking these concepts to Nyx, the myths suggest that darkness itself contains profound secrets about existence. Her son Hypnos, the personification of sleep, was particularly fascinating. The Greeks viewed sleep as one of life's great mysteries. Every night, consciousness vanished. People entered strange worlds filled with impossible events and unfamiliar landscapes. Hours passed unnoticed. Then somehow awareness returned. Even today, sleep remains partly mysterious despite scientific advances. Ancient storytellers transformed that mystery into mythology. Hypnos became the gentle force guiding people into dreams, while Nyx stood behind him as a deeper and older power. The relationship between night and sleep felt natural because darkness often signals the arrival of rest. Yet the myths suggest something more profound. They imply that sleep itself may be one of the hidden secrets carried within the night. Then there was Thanatos, the personification of death. Unlike later depictions of death as evil or monstrous, Thanatos was often portrayed as calm and inevitable. His presence reflected a simple reality: every life eventually ends. By making death a child of night, the myths once again connected darkness with one of humanity's oldest mysteries: what happens after life ends? Ancient Greeks offered different answers through different stories, but no explanation completely removed the uncertainty. Death remained an unknown frontier. The fact that Thanatos emerged from Nyx symbolized the way darkness conceals what lies beyond ordinary understanding. Perhaps most intriguing of all were the dreams. Some traditions describe countless dream spirits traveling from the realm of night into the minds of sleeping people. Certain dreams were believed to contain messages. Others were considered warnings. Some appeared truthful, while others deceived. Ancient people often struggled to distinguish between them. A vivid dream could linger in memory for years. A strange vision might seem important without revealing why. The uncertainty surrounding dreams made them fertile ground for mythology. Nyx became connected not only to darkness, but also to the hidden landscapes of the human mind. Another reason Nyx feels so mysterious is that she rarely appears directly in myths. Zeus, Hera, Athena, and Apollo participate in countless adventures. Nyx remains distant. She watches from the background. Ancient writers mention her importance without fully explaining it. This absence creates a unique effect. The less the stories reveal about her, the more mysterious she becomes. She resembles a shadow at the edge of a fire's light, visible enough to notice, yet impossible to examine clearly. Many scholars believe there may once have been older traditions about Nyx that were eventually lost. If so, only fragments survive today. Those fragments hint at a figure whose significance may have been far greater than modern readers realize. There is something deeply symbolic about this. Night itself can never be completely understood. People can observe it, experience it, and describe it. Yet some part of it always remains beyond reach. The stars appear, shadows lengthen, the world grows quiet. Imagination becomes more active. Questions arise that rarely appear during daylight. Throughout history, human beings have looked into the darkness and wondered what might be hidden there. The Greeks transformed that experience into the figure of Nyx. She became the embodiment of mystery itself, the ancient presence waiting beyond the limits of certainty. As the centuries passed and the old temples faded into history, many gods lost their influence. Yet the mystery represented by Nyx never disappeared. Night still arrives. Dreams still come. Sleep still carries people into worlds they cannot fully control. Questions about death, fate, and existence remain unanswered. In this sense, Nyx continues to exist, not as a literal goddess, but as a symbol of everything humanity has yet to understand. The ancient storytellers may not have possessed modern knowledge, but they recognized something timeless. Beyond every light lies darkness. Beyond every answer lies another question. And somewhere within that darkness, hidden beyond the reach of certainty, the oldest mysteries continue to wait, just as they did when the first Greeks looked up at the stars and imagined the silent figure of night watching over the world.